rising in significant part because of the tax breaks we've given to middle and low-income Canadians.
There you go.
The opposition parties have consistently voted against and that they want to reverse.
Here's a fact, Paul, that Canadians know, that back in 2008, Mr. Harper was misleading. He said that we were not in a recession. In fact, it turned out we were in the worst recession since the 1920s. He's trying to hide the fact that we are in a deficit again. Every outside analyst agrees with that. The parliamentary budget officer is categorical about that. It is 8 deficits in a row. It is $150 billion that he added to the debt. And Mr. Harper's job creation record is the worst since the Second World War.
Mr. Mulcair, just again, clarification on the facts. The reality is that figures out of the Department of Finance show that so far this year we are substantially in surplus and in fact well ahead of our budget projections, and those are the real numbers, and our debt levels are way below.
You're trying to deny the fact that for the past 5 months, those same statistics from the Canadian government have shown that for 5 months in a row, the Canadian economy has shrunk. We are 1 month away from a technical definition of recession, but according to a lot of observers, we're already in a recession.
Mr. Mulcair, I'm not denying that. What I am saying is that contraction is exclusively or almost exclusively in the energy sector. The rest of the economy is growing. It's projected to grow this year and into future years. And the way to handle a fall in oil prices is not tens of billions of dollars of increased taxes, increased borrowing, and increased spending. That's how countries get themselves into serious long-term trouble.
Mr. Prime Minister, you made a promise in the speech from the throne in 2007 that you would tackle the barriers to trade and labor mobility within this country as an economic union. And it's squarely your responsibility. You said you would go to the Trade and Commerce Clause of the Constitution. It needed to be. And now here we are as a country. We have more barriers to trade within Canada than the 28 nation states of the European Union. Why, over this period of time, where is your plan to break down the trade barriers within Canada?
The problem Mr. Harper has on that one is he simply refused to sit down and talk with the premiers over the past 10 years. It's just not showing leadership. We have a federation that needs people to sit down, talk about taxes, talk about barriers, talk about climate change, talk about how we're going to help Canadians get ahead in an uncertain economy. He has simply refused to engage with provincial leaders, whether it's on interprovincial trade barriers, whether it's on climate change, whether it's on training and job creation. And that's quite frankly not the kind of leadership that a broad and diverse country like Canada actually needs from a prime minister.
Let's actually be clear, Mr. Trudeau, on trade. The premiers and the federal government are working together on breaking down trade barriers. We have the New West Partnership. We made significant progress in that area, but more importantly, under our government, we have increased the number of countries with which we've concluded trade deals from 5 to 44 with the entire European Union, much of the hemisphere, and now a foothold in Asia. No government has opened up trade opportunities for Canadian companies and Canadian workers like this government.
But the Canada-Korea deal, which
well, you know, Stephen Harper is the only prime minister in Canadian history who, when asked about the recession during his mandate, gets to say which one.
He's just asked about it. Oh, geez, you opened a can of worms there.
And yes, a lot of experts say we already are in a recession. Mr. Harper, we want to spend our time concentrating on creating jobs for Canadians. What we're seeing here tonight is that you're going to do everything you can to hang on to your job. I'm going to do everything I can to create jobs for average workers.
And with all due respect, your foothold in Asia was to sell us down the river on national sovereignty. You've bound this country without a single set of hearings in Parliament to a trade, not a trade deal, an investment treaty with China that binds us until the year 2045, and we can't get out of it. We need to insist on transparency because Beijing's going to be looking over the shoulder of the next prime minister and telling us what laws we're allowed to pass.
With great regret, we're going to have to leave the segment of the debate on the economy, although I'm sure economic questions will come up in the rest of the night too. This concludes our first round on the economy. We'll continue after this break. Please stay with us.
I'm Gord Marknell. The Maclean's debate returns in 3 minutes. Right now, we are coast to coast with Canadians reacting and analyzing to what's being said tonight and what isn't.
What are they
Live
saying?
look right now at St. John's, Newfoundland, where students at Memorial University have gathered at the breezeway to watch the leaders face off. Now we move west to Tammy Sutherland, garnering reaction on a key issue the leaders were just discussing: jobs. Tammy.
Oh, jobs. That's number one. Gosh, that's right at the top as far as I'm concerned.
Students, they have been
God,
scrutinizing
more
some of the
jobs.
key issues
More,
when it comes to
yes.
pertaining to the country's.
Is there any way we can get
One
all
of
of
the big
it?
issues, of course, is the difficulty in finding a job. We're joined now by Angelie Sood, a journalism student here. Angelie, tell me a little bit about some of the concerns that you've heard from students on campus when it comes to
choose a hand.
jobs. Sure, Tammy. So, speaking with students
You have to choose a
tonight
hand
that are
for his
here in
white and
attendance
black.
watching the debate,
Oh, I just thought you were
the
gonna
big
be white.
issue
I
is
didn't
really
know you were
jobs.
black.
You know, we want to make sure that after spending so much
Okay.
money and so much time, so much investment on our education, that there's a return. We want a job after this, and we want to make sure that we can at least make a dent in our student loans. So, what's the minimum wage going to be? Do we have a
Yeah,
fighting
you're right.
chance,
Easy.
really?
Okay, and post-secondary education, of course, and loans, another issue as well.
Right, so those of us just
secondary education,
joined in. We're
maybe
watching the
workshops
debates.
after you finish your formal
Yeah.
training. Is there an opportunity
I don't
for
really-
extended
Riveting
growth?
All right,
debate.
thanks so
I
much,
don't think
Angelie.
we'll
We're
learn
going
a
to send it
thing.
over to Roger
Nothing
now,
really
who
matters.
is gauging the
I
debate
think
on
they're gonna say the
Facebook.
same
Roger.
thing a lot.
That's right. We want to get you involved here on Facebook.
Each
Kevin
person
James,
has
Public
some
Policy
things that they're
Manager with
sticking
Facebook.
to.
Kevin, thanks for joining us tonight. And we've been asking you questions online. Our first poll
Trudeau
results
seems
are
a
in.
little eager
Who
and
do people feel should be
and,
the leader of the country?
like
so
he's
we
hell
opened the
bent
poll
on
at the very
making
beginning of the
this a
debate,
hell
as
for
you can see
Stephen
here,
Harper.
we have
Mm.
50% of the people who've took.
We just making sure to cut down Mulcair, too, though.
Supporting Mr. Mulcair.
That's true,
And this has
actually.
all happened.
But he's doing it more like-
We haven't had a chance just on that reaction.
It's like
That's
getting
correct.
right
This
in
is early
Harper's
days,
shit while he's
you know,
kind
for
of
the
just
election, but
sliding
obviously early days for the debate as
Mulcair
well.
in his
We're
war.
going to see over the course of the debate
What
whether
do you
or
think,
not
Mr. Minister? A
And
lot
we're
of
also
love for
looking at
Elizabeth
some other
May.
polls throughout this evening. What are some of the other
Well, geez, I would love it,
Yeah,
but
we're
is it
gonna
gonna
look at
happen?
various deeper dives on
Right.
issues,
What-
economy, energy, the environment. How do Canadians on Facebook feel?
It says-
This is
about
Facebook.
these
All
things
right.
and leaders
Facebook
best
polls, right. They matter.
on those issues.
And the nice
Official
thing is
poll.
we'll be able to gauge this reaction instantly with Facebook.
Absolutely.
Yeah, well, I
The
guess
place to
it's
go for that is
in nature.
Facebook.com/claims. And we'll be asking you questions throughout the evening with lots going on. Are you surprised by what you're seeing?
Is he, like,
here?
trying not to
Just
talk
with
about
this time
Facebook?
Going back to it.
Well, I mean, again,
All right,
this
it's
is
been a while since I
early-
played
this is
chess
early
here,
moments
so,
before anybody's
yeah, I
heard
haven't
the
played
leaders'
years.
debate.
Well, not
So
literally,
again, it'll
but
be interesting to see
All right.
what we see
Horsey,
over
man.
the course of the
seriously.
Yay.
Catch you up there. We'll send you back to the
Me,
Maclean.
Kenzie,
With
White,
a live
Thomas-
look at Canadians tuning
Thomas
in.
Mulcair, black.
Yeah.
This is the Trudeau side.
Now back to the debates.
Welcome back to the Maclean's National Leaders Debate. Our second segment will be on energy and the environment.
Yeah, moved to there.
Move the night again.
2 years ago, Conservative Cabinet Minister Joe Oliver called oil exports an urgent matter of Canada's national interest. But since then, the two biggest pipeline projects, Keystone XL and Northern Gateway, are stalled.
We're glad that this pipeline is on the way.
It's almost 4 years since Canada
Mamma mia,
withdrew from the
you're
Kyoto
gonna
Accord.
Play me like that,
Is not where the solution lies. And now Environment Canada says we won't meet our targets for carbon emissions for 2020. What's the proper trade-off between wealth-generating energy exports and the environment? Can Canada afford to clean up its act? Can it afford not to? My first question on this topic goes to Stephen Harper. Mr. Harper, you've been Prime Minister for a decade, and you want to be a different kind of Prime Minister on energy exports. You want Canada to be an energy superpower. But major export projects
An
in the United
energy
States and China have
superpower.
stalled on your watch.
Sounds
What
like
have
a
you achieved in
villain.
energy exports that beats the record of your predecessors? What do you have to show on this file for a decade's effort?
Well, in fact, our energy exports have increased, not just our, until recently, obviously, not just our
So you
oil
got,
and gas exports in the
is
United
that-
States, but we've also seen an increase in uranium exports and coal exports and others to Asia. But I would say this, Paul, the federal government does not build pipelines. We obviously favor seeing a diversification of our exports, but we establish an environmental assessment process. Companies have to go through that, and they are going through that process. In terms of the Keystone Pipeline, as you know, that's the situation under control of the United States. I've had many conversations with President Obama. He's not asking Canada to do anything. He's saying he will simply make a decision that's in the Americans' best interest. But as you know, there's overwhelming public support on both sides. So I'm very optimistic in the long run about the future of that project.
you think we simply have to wait for a new president to get Keystone passed? And what if that president is a Democrat?
Well, that may be possible. That may be the case, but the reality is that there is overwhelming public support in the United States, including in Congress on both sides of the aisle.
What's that?
So I actually very confident looking at the field that
All right.
whoever is the next president, I think will approve that project very soon.
Have you found this to be frustrating? And Joe Oliver, as we said in the intro, called the Northern Gateway project.
I got these after seeing the Taj Mahal. I had to. I had to haggle quite a bit. The shopkeeper was very insistent.
We established the assessment recommended some.
I said, no money, no buy.
Project. We approved the project subject to those conditions. It's now up to the proponent.
He spoke very good English, but I pretended I
That is how
didn't.
the system works in this country.
Finally, if there had been a price on carbon, a nationally set price on carbon 4 years ago, would Obama have approved Keystone XL by now?
Absolutely not. The president has never said that to me. On the contrary, the president said that he's told me what factors will influence his decision. It will be his own evaluation of the United States' best interest. Let's remember, the United States has not even agreed yet to have greenhouse gas emission regulations on their own oil and gas sector.
Thank you, Mr. Harper. The first to respond to you on this is Elizabeth May.
Well, with all due respect, Mr. Prime Minister, your record on climate is a legacy of litany of broken promises, including one that's directly relevant to the questions that Paul Welsh was asking you about exports. You committed in 2008 not to export unprocessed oil, bitumen, to countries that have weaker emission standards than Canada. That would obviously include China, the destination point for Enbridge and Kinder Morgan, which only the Green Party on this stage opposes. It makes no sense to export unprocessed oil to countries with poor environmental records. You also committed to bring in a North America-wide cap and trade program, working with partners. That was way back in another speech from the throne in 2008. Under John Baird as environment minister, you committed to oil and gas regs, which we would see by 2010. And you also personally went to Copenhagen. It wasn't a previous promise from Jean Chrétien. You were in Copenhagen and committed to what was, I hate to say, a very weak target, but we are not going to come anywhere near it by 2020. And there's just no credibility at this point. Canada needs to take action. We're having a summer of extreme drought, raging wildfires, and really severe weather through all of our seasons. Canadians want action. Canada needs to take action so that we can defend ourselves from the changing global climate and from the impacts economically here at home.
What Mr. Harper has consistently misunderstood about what happens in the 21st century is you cannot
first kill, first blood. First kill, first blood.
And what's good for the economy. Mr. Harper continues to say, oh, we can't do anything on the environment because we'll hurt the economy. And not only has he not helped our environment, but he's actually slowed our economy. He cannot get our exports to market because there is no public trust anymore. People don't trust this government to actually look out for our long-term interests. He hasn't convinced communities of the rightness of his pipelines, of the proposals he supports. He hasn't been working with First Nations on the kinds of partnerships that are needed if we're going to continue to develop our natural resources. Canada will always have an element of natural resources in our economy, but the job of the Prime Minister is to get those resources to market. And in the 21st century, that means being smart and responsible about the environment. Mr. Harper's inability to understand that is exactly why he's so struggled to actually get our economy growing in the right way.
Well, Mr. Trudeau, let's be clear on what the record actually is. Not only do we take both the economy and the environment seriously, we are the first government in history to reduce greenhouse gas emissions while also growing our economy. And how have we done that? We do that through a sector-by-sector regulatory
If you don't move the rook or
where
the king,
where we regulate absolute reductions in emissions, and we do so in ways that we know will not kill jobs and will not burden taxpayers. The alternative mobility by all of these other parties is a carbon tax. It will hit ordinary workers and consumers hard.
Harper thought that by gutting our environmental laws, somehow he could get our energy resources to market better. How's that working out, Mr. Harper? None of those projects has gotten off the drawing board. It's not hard to understand why. Canadians across the country want a clear, thorough, credible environmental assessment process. Canada can be a leader around the world. We can play a positive role. But with Mr. Harper, we've got the worst of all. We've got dirtier air and water. We've got more carbon pollution. And we're a laggard on the world world stage.
And it's absolutely the only way that you can, with all
I've
due
never
respect,
heard that
Mr. Prime
before.
Minister, the only way you can take credit for the emissions drop, which only occurred in 2008 and 9, is the global financial crisis. That's the only thing that brought down our emissions. They would have gone up much more than they have now if not for the action of Ontario and shutting down coal-fired power plants in British Columbia and bringing in a carbon tax. The cold, cruel reality is that under your watch, greenhouse gases have been rising, carbon pollution has been rising as soon as our economy began to recover in 2009. Straight up line, straight up.
Greenhouse gas emissions have actually gone down and the economy has actually grown. Those are the facts. Mr. Mulcair says the projects, various energy projects are going nowhere. No, they are all in an environmental process that is going forward. We make sure that we look at that process and make decisions. The problem is that the other parties have taken positions, depending on who they're speaking to, in Mr. Trudeau's case, against every single one of these projects. By the way, not just oil projects, but in British Columbia,
That's not true,
against
Mr. Harper.
natural gas projects. They have opposed the governments
Mr. Harper.
to liquefy natural gas that is supported not only by the province of British Columbia and industry, by Aboriginal communities and a broad cross-section of
We
the
have
British
done
Columbia
nothing of the
population.
But
sort,
Mr.
Mr.
Prime
Harper.
Minister,
Mr.
and all
Harper is continuing to invent a tax, and quite frankly, Canadians are tired of that kind of leadership. You haven't been able to get it done on the environment, Mr. Harper. You haven't been able to get it done on the economy. You haven't built the kind of balance that Canadians expect. If we're going to build strong communities, if we're going to create jobs for our children and grandchildren while protecting our
Well, you know where's it gonna
water,
go?
our land, we have to actually show leadership.
But
And you have stepped
Mr.
back
Trudeau,
from any
under this
sort of
government,
confidence
emissions are
building
down
for government.
3%. Under the Liberal government, they were up
No.
30%. That's
Yes,
it.
sir.
But Mr.
I've
Prime
got a couple quick questions. Mr. Harper, will
We're just
Canada
gonna
meet
chase you
the
down.
targets that we went to Copenhagen to set for 2020?
As you know, what happens with the targets, I believe we will, but we now are focusing on a 2030 target. That's what every country is doing. We've set a target in concert with our international partners, 30% over 2005 levels by 2030. Look, we're going to have to obviously do more regulation. We're committed to doing that. We've announced some sectors, but there will also have to be technological transformation. Well, that's why we're investing over $1 billion a year in energy technology projects, and that's what has to happen.
I covered the 2008 campaign. Your minister at the time was promising regulations for the oil and gas sectors. When are they coming?
Well, I've been very clear that this is an integrated North American sector and we need integrated North American regulations. I've made that proposal to our partners, both the United States and Mexico. They haven't yet accepted that, but we are ready to go and we're continuing to try and engage.
When Obama
What's the
first came to Ottawa, he actually was all about announcing a North American energy partnership. He was going to work with Canada, and that was 8 years ago, and nothing has happened since. When Obama just announced recently landmark legislation moving forward on climate change action, Canada is nowhere to be found. That's why the Liberal Party is proposing that we work again on a continental model, work with the United States and Mexico to address both energy and the environment.
I like
in
my
a
horsey.
comprehensive way.
I don't want to lose my horsey.
Because it sometimes sounds like you say,
I like
if we
my
put the right
horsey.
price on carbon, we
I
have
don't
the
want
right
to lose
social
my
license, we
horsey.
can have pipelines going hither and yon.
Oh my
The
God,
US
these debates are
environmental
boring.
group says, no thanks, we don't want those pipelines.
Yeah.
And Canadians.
And the
British
recent
Columbians.
environmental groups in Canada and across the United States are so concerned about Canadian oil is because Mr. Harper has turned the oil sands into the scapegoat around the world.
Oh, the
Climate change.
scapegoat.
He has put a big
The
target on
scapegoat.
our oil sands, which are going to be an important part of our economy for a number of years to come, although we do have to get beyond them. And his lack of leadership on the environment is hurting Canadian jobs and Canadian relations with other countries.
Tom Mulcair.
Getting our resources to market is critical. But Mr. Harper's gotten the balance wrong. He's gutted our environmental legislation, and he knows that that's hurting jobs in our resource sector, it's hurting our economy, and frankly, it's hurting Canada's international reputation. Building on my experience as an environment minister, when I brought in overarching sustainable development legislation, I would enforce that type of legislation, make polluters pay for the pollution they create, and these projects would get looked at with a thorough and credible environmental assessment process. Mr. Harper and Mr. Trudeau both agree with Keystone XL, which represents the export of 40,000 jobs. I want to create those 40,000 jobs here in Canada.
So, Mr. Mulcair, will you stop the Kinder Morgan pipeline?
Says he
Are you
supports
opposing
energy
the Kinder
exports.
Morgan
Then he
pipeline
goes
as well?
abroad, he and his party, to argue against Canadian energy exports. You know, a moment ago, they talked about landmark decisions by the Obama administration in the United States. They're pushing ahead with national regulations
I
of
was gonna
coal-fired
move
electricity.
the
We
Queen
did that
from
in
here to
Canada. No,
here,
Mr.
so I
Mulcair,
would.
across
Mr. Harper,
several
you did not
provinces.
do that.
We did that
Is that
in
gonna work for you?
Ontario province.
I don't know, is it okay if I put it back?
And you
In Saskatchewan, in
Okay.
Nova Scotia,
I'll put
and that's
this-
why the reason we have the cleanest
Mr. Harper,
electricity
nobody
sector in the world and are
believes you.
fine and are
That
phasing
might
out
be a good
coal-fired
time
electricity
to take-
before anyone.
Actually, no, that's not very
Take a brief
good.
pause because
I'll
it's
stick
time
to
for
what
the
I
second round
did
of questions.
originally.
On the same
I
subject,
moved
so
the
save
Queen
your
from
thoughts.
here to
You'll get a chance to express them, but this question goes to
here.
Tom Mulcair. Mr. Mulcair, let's talk about pipelines because it seems like that's what we're doing tonight. You said you opposed Northern Gateway,
Hello.
Keystone XL,
Yeah.
and in its current formulation, Energy East. Should Canadians just assume that major energy export projects will be on hold for the duration of the Mulcair government's term in office?
I believe that a clean environment and a strong economy do go hand in hand. What we especially said in the case of Northern Gateway, and I got a chance to visit the Douglas Channel, is there was no safe way to bring those large super tankers into that narrow channel. That just doesn't make any sense. What I have said in the case of the Keystone XL, you just heard me repeat it, part of sustainable development is creating those value-added jobs in your own country. You don't export them to another country. By the way, that 40,000 job figure is Mr. Harper's own figure. Mr. Flaherty and him were boasting in the States that it would create 40,000 jobs there. I want to create those 40,000 jobs here in Canada. With regard to Energy East, it could be a win-win-win. Better price for the producers, more royalties for the producing province. It could also help create those jobs in Canada. And of course, it could help with Canada's own energy security. But here's the rub. Mr. Harper has gotten the balance
What's the
all
rub?
wrong. He has scrapped
Oh, wait,
a
is
series of important
That's your
environmental
king,
laws,
right?
It's my
starting with the
king, yeah.
Navigable Waters
Okay.
Protection Act, species at
What
risk,
did you
and affecting
move?
fisheries. Instead of
Was this
dealing
here?
with First Nations on a respectful nation-to-nation basis,
Right, isn't that my
he
king?
spends
Because our
$100
tall
million
one's our
a
king?
year
Yeah,
fighting
the
them in
tall
court.
one is the
We'll
king.
take a
Is that your
different
king, though?
approach.
No, that's
We'll
my
work
queen.
That's your queen,
First
right?
Yeah.
Nations. It'll be
So,
a new
yeah,
era
your queen.
in
Yeah,
relations
we
with
can do
First
it then.
Nations 'cause they
It's
are
my
the
queen, she can
resource
join
rulers
then.
in a lot of these
My king's
cases.
taller.
Mr. Harper is
Yeah.
belligerent.
Did you
Buddy Ken's
move
approach
this?
is not
Because
working.
now
That's
you're
why
in
not one of
check,
those
but I
projects
didn't move.
has gotten off the table.
In an interview with our colleagues,
So
on
I'm
not in
Episode
check.
3, you also said that for
Yeah,
energy,
because that's
it
my
makes sense
queen,
to try to
and then I
internalize
could
the
take your
price of the
king.
carbon in the price of the product. That
Oh,
sounds
it's
like a carbon
true,
price.
isn't it?
Would that be felt by
Yes.
consumers at the gas tank?
Was that?
Internalizing
Here,
the
or
cost,
was
as I
it-
just said before with regard to sustainable development,
I guess it
making
must have
polluter
been.
pay, that's a normal rule of
think it was
sustainable
there.
development.
Yeah, I think it was.
Otherwise, you're making
Must have been
everybody in
that.
society
So I
bear
put it there,
user pay,
which makes it
polluter
check.
pay, basic rules of sustainable development.
Yeah,
broad
so-
May,
overarching
basically,
legislation
that gives you the
wants to
opening.
change the
Basically,
charter rights
yeah.
Yeah.
You
include the
can't
right
move
to
it
a clean
there, so
environment.
you'd have to
Okay.
move something.
For the
else.
spirit of the game, right? We'll keep this going.
Mr. Mulcair has been somewhat inconsistent
Oh,
on
yeah.
pipelines. In English, he'll
There's
say that
weird
he
pockets
supports the
it's
Energy
kinda
East pipeline. In French, he said
Okay,
that
so
it's out
I
of
can't move from
question.
there.
That kind
No.
of inconstancy, quite frankly, isn't the kind of leadership we need.
Oh,
for
Mamma
Canada.
Mia!
You can't say one thing in English and it's opposite in French. The fact is, we need to restore public trust in our ability as a government to create a level playing field on which proponents of a project can acquire social license and gain the public trust from the communities that it'll touch by working in concert with First Nations, Métis Nation, and Inuit peoples to make sure the right partnerships are in place.
There's no
and
other
also
way.
to make sure that the scientific oversight and rules and guidelines are actually protecting Canadians. This is about not just doing right by our environment, it's also about doing right by future generations. I have
I'm just
three
gonna leave
kids,
Horsey
and I know
there
I
so
want my
that
kids
if you
to
want to
grow
kill
up in
my
a
guy,
country
I'll
as
take your
fresh
queen.
and pure and clean as Canada
Yeah.
was when as
So I'm gonna move
we remember it to
move
be
it
and as
all.
it used to be. And for that to take hold, we have to have a government that's actually demonstrating leadership, that understands that you cannot make a choice between what's good for the environment and what's good for the economy. In the 21st century, they go together. Investing in clean tech and jobs, investing in the kinds of pollution reduction and emissions reductions that we need is what this country hasn't done well enough under Stephen Harper.
Well, Mr. Trudeau, you do exactly what you accuse
Well,
Mr. Mulcair.
okay.
You go to one part of the country, Atlantic Canada, you're for energy east. You go to Quebec and you're against
Actually,
it.
Mr.
And the
Harper,
fact-
your
the fact-
friends in
the
New
fact of the
Brunswick
matter is,
attacked me
all of
mercilessly.
these parties have opposed all of these projects before we've even had environmental assessments. That's not the responsible way you do things. The government has environmental assessments. You take the evaluation based on that, and you move forward. And that's that's taking the jobs and the economy seriously along with the environment. The way you don't deal with the problem is start imposing carbon taxes that will inevitably raise money for the government. They don't reduce emissions. They hit consumers, and they hit consumers hard with the price of gas. You name it. That is not the way to deal with emissions.
Mr. Harper, Alberta and British Columbia and Quebec have a price on carbon right now.
86% of the Canadian economy.
Well, look, I say this. First of all, different provinces have different approaches. Some of them I prefer more than others. I think what's important, Alberta, previous government had a very limited carbon price that was about a tax.
Oh, that's a rook.
That's a rook, yeah.
No,
it was not about raising revenue for the government. It was not about taking money out of the pockets of consumers.
It's a bit of a dickhead pun.
Carbon price proposals proposed by the other parties would involve tens of billions of dollars of revenue for governments. And Paul, I'll say what I've said to people across the country. A carbon tax is not about reducing emissions. It is about getting revenue for governments that cannot control.
Well, I'll tell you one thing that is about lowering
I have to try to explain that the reason the Green Party opposes every single one of the pipelines that are proposed, risky pipeline schemes to get unprocessed oil out of this country. Mr. Mulcair's right. Every single one of these raw bitumen, unprocessed oil pipeline schemes is about
raw bitumen.
That's why the Green Party knows we can oppose every single one of them. And I would like to have Mr. Mulcair's answer clearly. Will you join us and fight against the risky pipeline and tanker expansion, tripling the transport?
What are you doing in my neck of town?
I share the same concerns.
Bishops like you
with regard to the Kinder Morgan pipeline.
That's like a good
and in fact,
Cape Breton.
that's another example of what Mr. Harper's done to our rules.
I followed you
around.
I hate that
those
song.
processes of Kinder Morgan are not even allowed to
looking you up there so much. Ain't much trouble for me.
So do you oppose
Where you move,
do you
I'm
oppose the
gonna
pipeline?
find you.
Opposing these pipelines systematically in advance
I
is
don't know
just
that
as
one.
wrong.
That one I made up just now.
Did you just make that up? That's why I don't know.
So you just said the
In the
process
case
is
of
flawed,
energy,
but we should
for
wait for it to
example,
yourself?
we would be replacing the
Oh.
super tankers that right now
The
come down the St. Lawrence and
NDPs
St.
are
Romuald
talking
across from Quebec City. We'd be replacing the
There you go.
extremely dangerous trains that are going through communities all across
Yeah.
Canada. Evaluation that we should do. Evaluation to get back to a credible system, which we've lost.
Come back, go back from whence
We
you
need a
came.
political approach that gets it,
Yep.
restores
English
that public trust
bastard.
that we have simply lost over the past years.
Yeah, that.
Mr. Harper has failed on the
English
environment, and
twat.
therefore he's failed on the economy. Mr. Mulcair continues to
That's
to
my
say
talent.
things in
That's my
both
talent.
languages, but I will say that on
Just-
Energy East, I've
I want the book.
consistently said that it
I
needs to
need to
gain
be
social
stuck.
license, and the Conservatives in New Brunswick, criticized me roundly when they were in
Ooh.
government. So I don't know what Mr.
He's
getting
Harper
defensive
over
done
here.
in terms of that.
Actually,
He's
Mr.
got
Trudeau
deal with that
said
energy
exactly the opposite.
It's getting hot. It's getting hot.
With that,
Criticized roundly.
last fall. It's easy to find that quote online.
I'm still not sure where you
Where'd you
stand
move?
on Kinder Morgan
I
because it's
moved,
pretty straightforward. They plan to
to here?
put 3 times
Yes,
as many
that's it.
tankers moving out Vancouver, loaded with diluted bitumen. It's very hazardous,
What?
risky material. And we know whether
She hates
regardless
his
of
bitumen.
what kind of
Yeah,
process it goes
bitumen.
through,
Where's my
it should
bitumen?
not go ahead. It must be stopped.
This is part of my track record that people are free to get salt. When it was the Rabaska liquefied natural gas plant across from Quebec City, and I was the Minister of the Environment, I didn't even want to look at it because of the danger of those tankers in the St. Lawrence. The same approach I took with regard to Northern Gateway and the dangerous tankers in the Douglas Channel. With regard to these other projects, we have to be able to look at them objectively with thorough, credible environmental assessment
So you take no
processes.
position.
I am taking the position that you can study these projects. Ms. May takes the position that you can say no to them, all of them in advance. Mr. Harper is taking the position that you can say yes to all of them in advance. We want a clear, thorough, credible process that the public can have confidence
The
in.
position of the government is that we have a scientific expert evaluation of every project before we decide.
Yeah, muzzle
That's how the
scientists.
government's-
Yeah,
That's how
bastard.
the government has handled these projects. Mr. Mulcair, by his own admission, has already ruled out a number of projects before they even went through the process, and is positioning himself to be against others as well.
I'm an intervener.
That is the record of the NDP. They're always for projects until they actually face one, and then they're against it. That's why in British Columbia, they oppose even liquefied natural gas.
Mr. Harper, I actually have a track record that people are free to look at. And when I was the Minister of the Environment, we sometimes had tough projects. There was a project involving the bridge at the 25 between Laval and Montreal. Lots of opposition to it. We went through a thorough evaluation process. We put down 18 conditions in the Order in Council approving that project. The public that had been opposed to it was on side by the end of it because they knew they could have confidence in us respecting the environment. Respect for the environment and a strong economy are not opposites. They go hand in
But
hand.
there's been
Northern
something the
Gateway
Prime Minister
before the
said.
evaluation, and your party opposes liquefied natural gas projects in British Columbia, widely supported, important to the energy diversity strategy.
Mr.
Show me
Prime
where I
Minister-
oppose that,
Mr. Prime Minister, where was your commitment you made at the G20 in Pittsburgh that you would end fossil fuel subsidies?
What you would take?
criticized
Hey,
the
wait,
other
they took my
opposition
man.
parties over new subsidies.
It took me a little guy.
Fossil
Took that.
fuels. So you made a commitment.
Yeah, man.
You've not eliminated the subsidies
Go
of
away.
oil sands, but now you've added new subsidies that go to liquefied natural gas, which is fracked gas over its lifetime. Has the same carbon pollution footprint as coal.
Whoa.
Neither of those
Whoa.
things. First of all, the government has in fact eliminated subsidies
Sorry.
to the oil sands and to the oil sector. We are providing accelerated capital cost allowance to provide clean, liquefied natural gas exports to help encourage that industry.
Tell
that
me
is
about
vital
that
not
good
just
you
to
went
British
for him.
Columbia, but to the energy sector in this country. We're doing so at a time when I have to remind people the energy sector has significant
Yeah, all I
challenges.
need.
This is a good project. These are good projects for the environment and for our economy.
One of
Mr.
the
Harper's
one of
plan
the
is
things
failing.
we've seen right across the board from this government is a misunderstanding of the role of government around protecting our future and thinking long term. We have at the Liberal Party a very clear plan to reduce climate change emissions by greenhouse gas emissions and fight climate change by working with the provinces. As was pointed out, 86% of our economy have committed to put a price on carbon with the actions of 4 different provinces that have taken up the leadership that this government has simply not shown. The Liberal Party is focused on working with those provinces to make sure we do reduce emissions because that's what actually Canadians expect in order to be.
What's he doing over there?
Oh, I have so many questions that I know so many.
Whoa!
We're going to have to wrap up this segment.
Whoa, baby.
Energy and the environment. I want to remind our viewers who are watching on TV that if you want to engage,
I mean, I used to this.
have your say on tonight's debate.
I want to talk about like it's a
So on our
baseball
Facebook
game.
page, you can talk to other voters about what's going on here while you're watching on
Like,
TV.
These guys
We can
lack.
talk
There's
about
nothing
this
going on
all
over
night,
here.
but it's time for
No,
debate.
that's true. But
Whoa, mama.
I don't know if anybody's shit about. Oh, trust me.
A live look
Get
now at
ready
the
to-
burning
oh, yeah, what
line
do
in
you do?
Montreal as Canadians continue hearing the issues that matter from coast to
Oh.
coast. We'll get back to the debate in minutes, but first, City News
Oh.
continues with in-depth analysis as the first debate of the elections.
I'm gonna hide over here.
And welcome back, and we are joined now by Kevin Chan, the public policy manager at Facebook. We've been talking about some of the polls we have. The latest one is about a carbon tax, what they were discussing just now, the leaders, and surprising numbers, resounding numbers with it.
Sure, we have an overwhelming majority of Canadians who took the poll on Facebook that said that they believe that there should be a price put on carbon.
And that is surprising when you overlay it with some of the numbers we've seen earlier over the last few months.
Yeah, absolutely. So when we look at the map of Canada, we've seen we looked at the 338 different varieties in Canada. We've looked at what are the key issues that Canadians care about the most. This is a map of the preferences for energy and environment.
What a
For
dick.
So,
Damn it.
Right? So the darkest one in Alberta, so you see
we're going to have to wrap you up right there. It's a tight show, and we have a special panel of political journalists delving deep into these stats and the issues. We'll send it to City News political specialist, Cynthia Mulligan.
Thank you, Roger. The gentlemen with me know the ins and outs of Canadian politics, and they will be joining me here for the next
Politics?
few hours. First, we have Cormac Sweeney,
Joyce,
Bureau Chief
you
of
have
680
one
News,
of my
John
nights.
Geddes,
Oh.
Maclean's Ottawa Bureau Chief, and
I've got a
Justin
knight
Ray, Vice
and
Parliamentary
queen,
Affairs
and
Department.
two punts. You've got a horseyman and 3 punnymen.
Yeah, we have a bit of a split. I think Justin Trudeau sounded really clear and concise on the first part. I thought he was a clear winner in the first round. Thomas Mulcair, the second round, had a very series of clear policies, serious indictments of the Prime Minister. I thought
Super
split the first
serial.
two. Harper stayed standing. That's all he really had to do. So it's a bit of a wash after the first period, I think.
Bit of a
I
wash.
think Mulcair had a challenge here in not playing to that pugnacious image. He wants to see more ministerial, less of a fighter, more of a guy who can talk in a conciliatory way. I think he's managed that so far. Hasn't been goaded into the tough exchanges. Most of the really tough talking over each other.
They in front of vinyl siding?
Between Trudeau and Harper.
What is
And I
this?
think Thomas must be very happy with that.
Initiated by Trudeau as well.
It's everywhere.
Well, I think I'm going to have to agree with Justin. I think there's a split between Mulcair and Justin Trudeau at the moment. And I think Justin's boxing photo op this morning really showed in the debate where he came out swinging on the other leaders. Mulcair at the start didn't seem to get his point across as much. But as the debate went on, he seemed to feel more relaxed. He looked better. He looked more calm, and he was getting his points across a lot better.
I thought it took him a little longer than I expected for him to make his stride, Mulcair. And I thought Harper hasn't been as aggressive as I would have thought. We will be back very shortly with more from our panel. And as we return to the debate, a hello to our viewers tuning in across the country. Here's Toronto students at Seneca College.
Reached the halfway point of the Maclean's National Leaders Debate. Our next topic of conversation is Canada's democracy. How it works, why it doesn't always work as well as we hoped.
It's surprising how much time we spent in recent years debating the
God, this seems bleak.
democracy. The Senate is a mess. Can we clean it up? Should we shut it down? Is that even possible? There are serious questions about how closely our elections reflect the will of the voters. Is it time to replace our first past the post electoral system? How can we fix decorum in the House of Commons? Order! And all the appointments the government makes in office. There's a lot to discuss.
If it's so easy to kill a bishop, shouldn't it be as easy to kill a horseman?
Did you take a bishop?
No, I took a pawn.
Yeah.
But now the quandary is, do you take my horseman or do you take my bishop?
This election will be won and lost.
Is this because you're trying to like lay up a sacrifice?
Which one benefits me more?
When I refer to the government as an elected dictatorship, it's not
It's like the debate.
to the Prime Minister nor to his party. It's a reference
My little
to what's
Elizabeth
happened
man.
with the growth, an unhealthy growth of power in the Prime Minister's office, which goes along with less of a role for individual members of Parliament doing their fundamental jobs. The only job description for a member of Parliament is that found in the Constitution, which is to represent your constituencies. So we need to actually revisit parliamentary democracy, understand this election isn't about electing a prime minister. We don't do that in this country. We elect members of parliament, and their job is to find the government that will hold the confidence of the House so we can work for Canadians. As far as Greens being concerned about this, not at all. Well, we have had success, and we've now had my election in Saanich Gulf Islands, but across provinces. In British Columbia, Andrew Weaver, in New Brunswick, David Coon, in Prince Edward Island, Peter Bevan Baker, all of us got elected by driving up voter turnout. So instead of fixating on this splitting the vote non-problem, vote splitting, we need to focus on the real problem, which is that 40% of Canadians in the last number of elections haven't voted. And vote abandoning, in my view, is a much bigger problem than vote splitting. And we're going to do everything we can to reach out to young people, First Nations, and those disadvantaged by the Conservative Fair Elections Act to get out a higher level of vote so that Greens can win in the current system, but that so Canada wins with a healthier democracy.
We've said we don't elect a prime minister, and that's true. But we saw quite a mess of a coalition crisis in 2008. Are we headed towards that sort of arbitrage among parties after the next election if there's no majority?
I can't tell you how committed Green MPs as a caucus will be to working with other parties, working across party lines to ensure that we go from a precarious, perhaps 2-year minority parliament to a stable, productive, effective parliament. Because you look at really great parliaments in this country, and I refer viewers back to Lester B. Pearson, where the small group of NDPers
Hold on, let's face off this app.
and Deep Baker and the
I could bowl you over.
You won't.
Yeah, they're like,
You won't.
He makes a number of great points.
Bowl you-
But, one of the
bowl you
ones
over.
is
oh,
That's what I fell for. But you.
that gun.
That's supposed to.
Because when you zig, I'm gonna zag.
Negativity, the attack, the divisiveness that tends to be rewarded all too often with electoral success that ends up making it more and more difficult to govern. But one of the things that really frustrates a lot of people is when they see politicians pander, when they say one thing in one part of the country and a different thing in another part of the country. One of the things that unfortunately Mr. Mulcair has been doing quite regularly is talking in French about his desire to repeal the Clarity Act, to make it easier.
Oh my God, it's
for those who want to break up this country to actually do so. And in doing so, he's actually disagreeing with the Supreme Court. He said that one vote is not enough to break up the country. And anyone who wants to become prime minister not only should not say different things in French and in English, but should make sure that they side with the Supreme Court when it comes to unity of our country.
Mr. Mulcair, you get to answer that.
Well, I've fought for Canada my whole life.
Fuck
for Canada.
I heard fuck.
I fuck for Canada.
In the 1995 referendum, I spent
I
13
got
years
fuck for
in the
Canada.
National Assembly in Quebec City, and I was always
Fucking love
consistent
Canada.
fighting for Canada.
Canada gets me
I can
hard.
understand it's a bit frustrating for the Liberals
Red
for the
hard.
first time in a whole generation.
Right. Some hard.
Nothing to do with the Liberals.
Canada.
Understand why.
You get me.
The only two people I know in Canada who are anxious to start talking about separatism again.
Oh, you did it.
Justin Trudeau and Jim
Yeah, I
Rousseau.
don't know.
Mr. Trudeau has an obligation, if he wants to talk about this subject, to come clean with Canadians. What's his number? What is your number, Mr. Trudeau?
First of all, Mr. Mulcair, I don't
You're not
question your patriotism.
You have an answer.
The question is,
What's
why
the
is your
number,
policy
Justin?
so reckless? You want a number, Mr.
Yeah,
Mulcair?
give
I'll
us a
give you a
number.
number. 9. My number is 9. 9 Supreme
The
Court
face-off's
justices
over.
said
Boom.
one vote is not enough to break up
Face-off
the country.
over.
And yet that is Mr. Mulcair's position. He wants to be prime minister of this country, and he's choosing to side with the separatist movement in Quebec and not with the Supreme Court of Canada. And he's bringing this up. It's his policy to repeal the Clarity Act. He quietly put forward a bill in the House of Commons on that. He announced it very loudly in French. He very loudly announced it in French 6 weeks ago at the Saint Jean-Baptiste parade, and he won't talk about
One more
it
chance,
anymore.
Mr. Trudeau's name a
I
margin
won't
of
talk about it.
The Supreme Court
You gotta talk
said
about
very
it.
clearly, Mr. Mulcair's number is not the right one. What it also said is the number is to be set in the context of the next referendum.
Take part in this
It is
conversation.
in the next
While
referendum.
I'm at it,
If I can, Paul. Look, I'm not going to question Mr. Mulcair's position as a longtime federalist. That is clear. What I think I do question, along with Mr. Trudeau, is why bring up a debate of the Clarity Act other than to satisfy the separatist elements within the NDP in Quebec? Nobody's talking about that. You know, we just had Quebecers massively reject that
What
agenda.
we're talking about.
Nobody wants
That's
to
not what we're talking about, eh?
We're talking about
Jesus.
how we can best break up the country when
I
in
think you
fact,
were a robot.
Quebecers
Sure,
clearly
So I
do
just
not want
moved
to hear
there.
that. I don't
Okay.
understand
One thing that
Let me
Mr.
start
our
Harper
numbers.
and I do agree on,
Since
Paul.
there's a debate among two of our leaders about the margin that would decide this question in sovereignty, let me put the question to the Prime Minister. As a Reform MP, you used to support a 50% margin in a referendum.
Which color am I?
I don't believe I've heard you give a number or revisit that question as Prime Minister.
Well, you haven't heard me revisit it, Paul, because I don't think it should be revisited. Look, what happened in 1995? We know what happened again, where they tried to get 50% plus 1 by invalidating a whole bunch of Federalist votes. So I do think we have to look very carefully at that if we ever have that problem again. But, you know, I think Quebecers
Oh, what's he gonna do?
rejected
What's he all about, eh?
40 years of a debate that has done nothing but damage to that province.
On
I think
that,
Quebecers
and
have
the
irony-
I just
So
don't
well,
know
why
anymore.
Why start
On that-
calling
Goodness
there
sake.
separatists in Quebec?
Ugh,
Prime Minister.
No way.
that's no way.
Yes,
Ah,
that's what he
That's
did in his
no
bill. And
way.
to say otherwise, as Mr. Trudeau's doing, while still refusing to give his number,
Mr.
is
Mulcair.
a dangerous political
Mr.
game. And I'll
Mulcair.
tell you why. If yes doesn't mean yes, then people could decide to vote yes as a way of sending a signal.
Ooh.
That's why it's a dangerous political game. And that's why it's not a serious
That's a
way to
good
talk
laddie.
about a very serious subject. But I'm so proud, and I have confidence in Quebecers who have twice rejected separation, and I fought in both of those referendums.
Then why,
Now, Mr. Mulcair rejected. You're trying to throw gasoline on a fire that isn't even burning.
Mr. Trudeau has lost confidence, and he thinks that it's a winning situation for the Liberals to scratch that old wound. That's what they want to get back to.
You are the one who announced that
What's your number,
position
Justin?
on separation, on making it
What's
easier.
your number?
My position is the Supreme Court's position
What's your
that
number?
says the number should
Why
be
is
set in the context of the next referendum, if that ever comes. And your play to try and stoke up that separatist vote for the
Whoa,
NDP
he's
by
getting heated, huh?
Saint-Jean-Baptiste
Get
6
in there.
weeks ago, that this is continuing to be your policy, is not worthy of a prime minister.
This has
No
been
prime
our
minister
policy
should make it
for 10
easier.
years, but
No
there
prime
is
minister
one
should make
thing
it easier.
Hey, come on, you're getting hot-headed. Take it easy on him. Hey. Don't be hard. Don't be so hard on the guy. He's not such a bad guy, huh?
We can, as Canadians,
Oh, he's all right.
Hey, come on. He's not such a bad guy.
He's not so big.
And I would like us to be able to talk about what
You
we
got
do
to admit that. Yes.
because that's
Oh
important.
man, this is so
And I
weird.
don't believe that we want
It's all right,
to get
Dave.
ourselves
I went to see a
mired
guy
into any
about a
threat of
place whose
separatism.
name was Graham, and he spelled it
The Liberal Party has a
Graeme,
project of
which I've
electoral
never seen
reform
before.
that Mr. Trudeau has said he wants.
And then the guy that I went to
next
see at the
election,
sausage, about the sausage
He doesn't
slinging
want to have a
job,
referendum on
was
any
also
reform.
named
Stephen
Graham,
Harper wants to
and he just
insist
emailed
that
me,
any
and
change
he
to the electoral
spells the
system
same way.
go through a referendum process. Why do you think that should happen?
Well, I think it's a very fundamental
That was
change
something
to
that the
way
first
our
student told me.
political
He's like, I've never seen
have
anybody
a
spell it the way
system.
I do until I moved here, and
voters
I
are
met
able
like
to
3
elect
people
governments, they
named
don't
Graham.
elect coalitions that make
And
up
it's
the
all-
government later. And you know,
Yeah,
Canadians, Paul, this has come up before.
Whose move is it?
It was
That's my
subject
move.
of
Okay.
a
It's taking a
referendum
while.
plebiscite in Ontario and Prince Edward Island, British Columbia. I have not found Canadians who want to make this change, this fundamental change. In fact, whenever Canadians are asked, they reject it. We know the rules. Let's play under the rules that Canadians.
What's
That's not
interesting is
actually
to
the
hear
case.
Mr. Harper say that today, because when he brought in his Unfair Elections Act, he refused to even talk to Canadians
Unfair
about it.
elections.
We
Act.
stood up strong in the House of Commons and opposed it.
Jiggy.
We shut down the travel of our parliamentary committee, used every tool in our parliamentary toolbox to stop him from trying to walk away with the next election by jigging the rules. He's actually made it harder for whole classes of Canadians to vote. And that's not just our opinion. All of the experts who have looked at his Unfair Elections Act have said the same thing. So, Mr. Harper, if you become such a
Yeah.
keen fan of making sure that no single party can change the rules, why did you go ahead and do just that with your Unfair Elections Act?
Well, the Fair Elections Act, the principal change it makes, and this is
Ah.
what the other parties oppose, is that voters.
What you gonna do, eh? What you gonna do? My bum is in a place. He's in a perfect place. And look at him. Hand carved Taj Mahal. Mwah.
That's important.
That's a good luck.
That change was made in
Whoa, he goes back there.
It wasn't made.
Of Canadians.
Was already made
believe
before
that
you
you should
even
be able
introduced
to
the
show
Fair Elections Act.
show identification and identify who you are before you vote. And frankly,
He's a
I
coward,
think
eh?
voters should be worried about political parties who would not do that, who think
This
it's fine
is
to
a
have people
perfect
vote who
example.
can't
This
identify
is a
themselves.
perfect example of how Mr. Harper creates straw man arguments, creates fears
Check.
of massive voter fraud. When his party was pressed on examples
Something
of people
about
fraudulent
check.
some of his MPs
Yeah.
testified to things that they actually hadn't seen. The fact of the matter is, the job of Elections Canada, what we should look at as a goal, as a
Yeah, but
country, is to try and encourage as many people as possible to vote. And the changes Mr. Harper has made to the Elections Act actually make it more difficult for students, for Aboriginal and Indigenous communities, for many seniors to actually vote. And
Great, you can talk out of breath.
and
We're also
people
impressed with
without
you.
ownership.
Yeah, that's what
The
he's
fact
been
is,
doing a
we
lot.
need
He's
to
like,
make
he can
sure
barely
that
keep
those
up.
voices are being heard, because those voices are not just marginalized in voting rights, but in so many aspects of society. And Mr. Harper apparently wants to keep
Mr.
it that
Trudeau,
way.
how would we know? How would we be able to identify voter fraud if we can't even identify who voters are? This is a
Electoral
common sense reform supported by 90% of Canadians, and we
Some
have made
third
sure
man shit.
that there is ID that is applicable.
Ah, the sewers. It's so well shot.
That's
all those scenes.
One of the things it did was allow you to extend the election campaign to 11 weeks and prorate expenses to match.
Oh,
Did you have
Wait a
this
minute.
kind of long election campaign in mind for 2
Hey, it's
years?
not over.
We agreed, all of us here agreed, to have an election debate this week months ago. Everybody knew an election would be on.
Everyone knew. Come on, y'all got the
It's very
memo
simple.
from Harper,
We
me
are going
Harper
to be
himself.
in an
Hello.
election campaign. We should be under the rules of the Election Act, not using parliamentary
So
resources,
why were
but
you
using
putting up
resources
24/7
that our
on
party
your
raises.
website, Mr. Harper?
We're going to continue this with a new round of budget
Unanimous number one
by the luck of the
talking
draw.
man.
First
They give him best man, best talker.
Harper.
100 beams of light. Or was that? What was that move?
King
Now
from here
you're
to
promising
here.
you won't
All right.
name senators at all. You blame the courts. For
That's
blocking
a
reform,
check
and you've
out.
asked the provinces to come up with ideas.
Oh shit! I didn't see that.
Yeah.
But
Okay.
the courts and the provinces didn't name.
Can
the
you
senators
go-
And I guess I can only go here.
Do you owe Canadians
Yeah,
an
that's I think
apology
the only spot.
for putting Mike
Well,
Duffy,
actually, I could
Pamela
go
Wallen,
here,
and
but-
Patrick Grasso in the
Oh, yeah,
Senate?
you could go there too, right?
First
Okay,
of all,
either of
I
those two.
certainly did not name all of the senators that are in trouble. The Senate has
This game's been a bloodbath.
that has
Yeah.
these kinds of problems.
Yeah.
I'd say
Some
for the
good.
first time,
There's been some
we actually
serious
have a Senate
casualties.
now that's clear
Kenzie's
rules
pawns have been
and it's
decimated,
enforceable.
but
What I will say
Yeah,
is
I
he's
have
got
more
my
pawns.
queen
is
and
not to
yeah, he's got more
apologize
pawns
for
too.
bad actions
He's got more
of
red
others.
than
oh,
that.
you just got a few more links spaced out, I guess.
Is to take responsibility
Yeah,
and
it's
hold
been a
people
bloodbath.
accountable. That's exactly what
That's fun.
Your policy now is not to name senators essentially indefinitely. There's already a court case
There was.
for a judge in British Columbia on the assertion that that simply won't work. That you can't empty out the Senate over time because it denatures the constitutional mandate of the Senate. Have you sought constitutional advice on whether you can go ahead with your new policy?
Oh, absolutely. Now you can't empty the Senate entirely, but we have. I've left 22 seats vacant already. Prime Minister has the power to name those or not name those in the Senate, and what we've been able to achieve with that is to begin bringing the cost of the Senate down. They've actually fallen by some $6 million. I think those Senate vacancies will force most provinces, who, by the way, almost all of them who have opposed Senate elections and Senate reform, to come clean with that and explain why those senators
Lump
aren't
on the
being elected. I
Scotty
gave them a chance,
soundtrack
they won't elect them,
for your finisher.
and why they won't vote.
Find
I
it.
think
It goes with the election.
over time, public pressure will force this issue to be resolved. Vacancies, I think it will raise questions of why we continue the Senate.
I realized I was goth when I realized I was doing covers of Crayon and Scotty. I must be goth.
I have taught in 3 provinces.
Why do I want to do
for a
Crayon
long
and
period of
Scotty
time, but I know what the positions of the provinces are. They were also clear in court. There is
Wash.
nowhere near consensus
must be.
on either reform
Duak.
or abolition, and I think opening up constitutional discussions is the wrong priority for the country. Our priorities are the economy and security. If the provinces really believe the Senate should be fixed, tell us how. They've opposed that. And if
So
they
yeah,
abolish.
go to the canada.gov.ca/suggestion box and tell Harper himself.
You could say
How
that
do you
there are
take the
broken promises
government
and then
copy
there
better?
are broken promises. Mr. Harper promised solemnly Canadians
People like your photo
never
on Instagram.
name.
You put it on Instagram.
He's gone on to break a record.
How do
and
I
name
see
59
where
of
the
them, and
people like
the
it?
list of conservative
Oh, is that all their names
senators
next
under
to the
Harper.
heart?
The names, man. The
One,
names.
two,
I'm looking for a
warm
mandate
het
on
steak,
October 19th.
steak
Put an end to this
girl,
mess once and
steak,
for all. Canadians deserve better.
and
I
like
think that there are
Like
3
Wood
things
Buffy.
we can do
like
with
wood
regard to
steak,
our
Yeah, yeah.
institutions to make
Vampire
sure
steak.
that
Not just a
every
fan of
vote
steak.
counts with the proportional representation system.
zero tricks.
Open up Parliament,
Mhm.
for example.
Tab-
Get rid of the
Tabita
secrecy
Rex.
of the internal
Tabit-
committee that looks at how
Tabita
taxpayers.
I
money
love
is spent.
hearing
Think taxpayers have the right
Internet
to see
avatars
how
right out
every
in
single
court and
dollar
any sort of official stuff where it's like,
in that secret committee is
suck my own
spent.
dick, man.
By the way,
Was accused.
if you want to get rid of the Senate, abolition.
Well, that's
Mr. Trudeau
but
thinks
this would
we
be
need
pretty
better
good.
senators. I think we
Like
need
someone
only
trying to speak
4
elite
senators.
and
Mr. Trudeau.
someone
Yeah,
explaining
Mr.
out
Harper
elite
said his
speak
plan
and
Senate
Elite
reform.
speaking
in a
of
court
Provinces
proceeding.
Stop me before I
Yeah,
point
well,
again.
they're having
End bracket
He made a
0
solemn
0.
promise,
they're literally having another right now where like with
and
the
he
whole
broke
Silk
that
Road thing, they had a
promise on
set
his
precedent for
very
how emojis
first
are in court.
day
And
as
and the people that were
Prime
the jury,
Minister
it's like
Michael Fortier to
the
Senate.
guy has a good argument for that.
And then
Being
he
like,
broke that
the
promise
jury didn't
58
understand
more
Yeah.
times.
emojis.
So I can
How can
understand
you have
why
an
nobody
impartial
would
jury
believe
when they
him
don't
he
even
says
understand the
he's not gonna
technology they're
appreciate
judging you on?
it.
It's like, oh, dude, you were like you're a glorified drug dealer. Like,
The next Prime
drug dealing
Minister eventually
sucks
sits
if you're high
down
up, especially.
with the
Like,
premiers to actually talk
but
about things.
you
I
know,
can tell you,
Yeah.
Canadians are going to want the Prime Minister and the premiers to talk about
to
jobs,
have a court
to
that's
talk
really
about
not
climate change,
really
to talk
not
about
on your side.
healthcare,
That's
not
not
to
good.
talk about how to open up
Okay,
the
I've got
Constitution
like
to try and improve the Senate. The fact
maybe
is, the
one or
Liberal
two.
Party
What was your last
actually
move
took
there?
concrete action
I
to
don't remember if I made it. I think I
senators
picked up
from
my
our
bishop. I'm
caucus
going
to
to move my
make sure
bishop.
that any future
Yeah,
appointments are done in a
Yeah.
transparent, nonpartisan way to actually reform the
I think I
Senate
had like two
without
options.
diving into
I
constitutional
can't
reform.
move
Yep.
this.
Well, with all due respect, Mr. Prime Minister, whoever gave you the
I could
advice
move
that simply
I
announcing
can't
you
take
wouldn't
that.
appoint senators is
Oh.
constitutional piece to go back to law school. What you're
didn't
doing is
think about that.
unconstitutional. But the
Damn.
single biggest scandal
Okay.
that has yet occurred in
Okay.
Canadian
That's
history
okay.
was not the
That's a
spending.
move.
Okay.
The
That
really
works.
illegitimate notion that the Prime Minister's office has
Oh
the
yeah,
right
I
to
feel
tell
good
its
about that.
conservative senators how to vote. And for the first time in the history of this country,
Oh,
It took a
God
while.
damn you, YouTube.
It's like right there.
Yeah, I wasn't even looking at that.
Passed Bruce Heyer's Climate Accountability Act, and when it went to the Senate, the conservative senators were instructed to kill it at their first opportunity. This is the first time in the history of this country that appointed senators have killed a bill without a single day of study in the Senate of Canada.
Mr. Harper, did you ask the senators to stop that bill?
What we always ask senators to do, we cannot force them to do anything. We ask them to party didn't support that particular bill. But what I would say is this: look at the facts of Parliament under this government. This is often not reported. We have backbenchers operating and voting more freely.
But on the other hand,
We have more private members' legislation that has gone through Parliament under this government than multiple governments before us. That's the reality of the situation.
We've also invoked closure more than all
I didn't mean to do
previous
that.
prime ministers.
In front of the Senate, the day those
I bleed.
to block a bill that had been adopted by those people who had been elected by the Canadian voting public. Ms. May is right. That was the first time in 75 years, and on what subject? Most important issue facing future generations. I don't want my grandchildren to have to bear the burden of wrong-headed choices today. Mr. Harper has just admitted that he asked the senators to vote to kill a bill adopted by the House of Commons. What greater proof of a lack of respect for our fundamental
Let's see where it goes.
democracy than asking unelected people to defeat a bill voted upon and enacted by the elected Parliament?
Let's be very clear. We simply ask senators to stick to their principles. And the fact of the matter is that private members' legislation has been bought very frequently.
I gotta say it. Check your
City government legislation.
Check
your senators. And we have 22 vacancies. We have a healthy
59
I do have a
times,
question,
Mr.
Mr.
Harper. You
Mulcair,
broke your
Senator
promise
Abolition.
59
Well, can I lay out the record on that? Can I lay out the
Yes,
record on that? For
Lay it out.
3 years, we left
Lay it
some
out.
20 vacancies in the Senate, invited the province to finally to get government legislation.
You gotta move 'em somewhere.
Yeah, well, I gotta
I would
move.
appoint senators.
Hey, we all gotta move, eh? We all gotta move.
Now that we don't need to, we have stopped. But Mr. Trudeau, you talk about truth. You just said there are no liberal senators.
That was my chance, you annoying
On our
bastard.
Website, there are 29 liberal senators there working for the Liberal Party.
It's greedy, I know. But I feel, and it was also strategically helpful.
Your premier, Philippe Couillard, has told the Queen's
Oh, you might.
Quebec premier will ever
No, you won't.
given that
Oh.
major constitutional reform is usually required. Is that not a problem?
Well, I was with Philippe Couillard just a few weeks ago, and it's a long-standing position, and one that I quite understand. But we would take a completely different approach to dealing with the provinces. This issue,
Oi, honest. Gutsy.
for a long time.
Oi, honest.
That would mean
Gutsy.
sitting down with provinces and territories.
Sound like,
Refused to attend a single
Oh, yeah.
Bob's wife.
Oh, she's so great.
Trying to sing along with her.
What's that there? God damn it.
one or the other of the provinces on a rotating basis.
That's right in your path.
I'm not afraid of sitting down with
You
my
sneaky bastard.
on things like healthcare. We need a new accord. We need a modern accord. Of course, I'm going to sit down with them instead of dictating big cut like Mr. Harper did just a couple of years ago.
Well,
So on the
healthcare
Senate-
transfers have
On
risen.
the Senate
Alright.
reform,
Alright.
I would ask for a mandate on October 9th.
All right.
The hard work that I've already started, in fact, in opposition, of meeting with the premiers to try to get them on board to get rid of this undemocratic, unaccountable institution that is a relic from our colonial past.
Mr. Mulcair, not only do you respect, as I do, the government of Quebec's position against Senate abolition, it was your position for all the years you were in the government of Quebec.
And
So you should be clear about that.
Mr. Harper is proving my point. It's a long-standing position since the unilateral patriation of the Constitution in '82. Every successive Quebec government has said that.
There.
That's why I'm not at all hesitant to sit down again with
Come what
my
may.
colleague Philip Biot,
Come
and
what
work on this
will.
very tough issue,
Senate
because I
abolition.
believe sincerely that the only way to deal with the Senate
It was
is to get
chaos.
rid of it. $1 billion has been spent. on
Something's
the Senate
gotta
on Mr.
give.
Harper's watch. He's done nothing about abolition. He's done nothing about reform. Can you imagine how many childcare spaces we could have created with $1 billion, Mr. Wells?
I'm just reminded that Elizabeth May has not had much of a chance to address these
I would appreciate that. The way that the
think that's
Greens
checkmate.
advocate that we change
Oh, no,
the way
it's
we make
not.
decisions in
It's
Canada
not.
to create a space where we
Second
can work
move
together,
here.
is to create a Council of Canadian Governments, which would include
Hey.
building on the Council of Federation, but federal, provincial, territorial,
And I think that makes it
representation from
checkmate.
municipal and
I
local
think it
governments, as well
probably
as
does.
First Nations, Métis, and Inuit, around the same table.
Gotta
We
move.
need to deal with
I guess I would have to
Senate.
kill
It's not my top priority
two
because
pieces.
it's
No,
hard.
wait. I'd have to be able to kill
It's
this.
Anybody, you can kill whoever you want. You get your last kill. Make it a good narrative.
Change our constitution by referendum.
Oh yeah, I
Instead of
guess I
the
would get like
antiquated
my
formula
last kill.
we're saddled
Ready?
with
It's
today.
the
Mr. Trudeau,
the
Prime
king
Minister called
King.
it out. He said
Horsey
there's a lot of
man,
local senators on the website. Is there
Queen,
a couple of Vancouver local senators?
and
No,
Rookie.
he is not part of our caucus. We have released the senators so they can.
He kills the queen.
and they've chosen to
Takes her-
continue to call themselves liberals. But unlike what
Well,
Mr.
well,
Harper
well,
said,
you,
which is the key,
look at him. Is he
right
gonna
now,
lean?
those
You're on a lean.
senators
You're the
voted
Robert
on the
Baratheon of
referendums.
fucking
I haven't
kings.
done that, and I know
And I
that
do you in.
that over
I'm but a
senators
rook.
who are
I
now,
don't even know your name.
formerly in the Liberal caucus, because
It's
we
a
feel
shameful end.
decisions that are taken in the upper house
And I win the
should be
Canadian
independent of
elections.
the
Oh, not the elections.
Mr.
Actually,
Harper
That was fun, though.
in the Senate,
That was
Good
nice.
game. Shake up the camera.
Do we have?
every single time.
That's not true,
We
Mr.
have
Harper.
about 20 seconds.
To listen to Mr.
Hands.
Trudeau, you somehow have to believe that the Liberal senators.
Zero
have somehow
viewers,
changed
but
now
people
that
might
they're
watch this on
Senate
YouTube,
liberals.
so.
Here's the reality.
We could do another
During
one.
the most recent
Well, the
provincial
debates are
elections
still
in
going.
Nova Scotia,
Yeah, it's true.
the new premier had
How long
all
are they
of
gonna
the
keep going?
Senate Liberals up on stage, thanking them for
Hard-
doing his
it doesn't
fundraising.
say.
The bagmen of the Liberal
Could
Party
be.
are still in the
Oh,
Senate.
Here's a
wow.
surprise for you. Larry
Could be-
Campbell's
could be
endorsed me in my
sometime.
riding just on
There
the
you go. I think that's the
I'm afraid
answer.
we gotta
It's
say
not a
goodbye.
terrible angle.
Stay with us for the final
Let's see.
round.
I just tried to
And
get
for
it
closing
to work,
remarks.
We're not getting a lot of hits, eh?
So that is like this. And this way.
We have moved our viewing parties west and are taking a live look now at the University of
Put
British
something
Columbia.
maybe
Packed
like
tonight as more
indicate
Canadian youth
a second
tune in to the
game.
debate and the issues that impact our nation. Welcome back. Our issue to go as we approach the
Welcome
final
back.
leg of this debate. Justin, I'm going to start with you again. What are you
Here.
thinking so far on round two?
Yeah, so I think Mulcair was quite strong in the Senate. He had a couple
That's
issues where he
Mulcair
I think
did a
could have been a
good
lot
job.
stronger, but eventually
Oh, I'll be white
got
now?
into his groove. He went
Yeah.
after the
See
Prime
that?
Minister. The Prime
That'd be
Minister
nice.
looks weak on democratic reform, and I think he looked weak there. Elizabeth May brought herself into the
Look at
debate
the
by knowing the numbers, by knowing for fact
So-
what she was going to say ahead of time, by having a very clear, concise message. She got there. She made her point. I don't know if it's going to connect with
The
the
queen
Canadians,
go
but
in her own
at
color
least
or
she
the
got
king?
into that debate.
John Gaines.
Let's Google this and just be sure right off the bat. I just took it out as it was laid in. It was laid out properly.
Right.
And I'm forgetting what that was.
No, it was right. I think the way we just did it.
I think the bishops are closer than the horseymen, right?
They are,
It's
yeah.
not his job as a leader
Yeah,
to
you get-
apologize
Man, he's a
for the actions
slanty
of others
kid.
when asked about should he apologize.
That's a tough
Google.
question to Paul asked. You need to apologize, and given the toughness of the question, he gave a little bit of an awkward answer. But man, what was he supposed to say?
Cormac.
Oh, I think Harper was really good on the question of separation when that came in, and Mulcair and Trudeau were going after each other. That was probably one of his stronger points. But then he was on the hot seat again, taking a lot of attacks, and we've heard that is not true so many times throughout this debate. I think Trudeau as well has performed well, especially
Queen
on
on her
the
own
of the
color,
Senate.
yeah.
saying
White queen, white square.
Harper taking a lot of heat tonight, and Canadians
And that's
are
the
piping
queen.
up about these very
Queen's
issues
of the
right
white
now
square.
on Facebook.
Right.
Roger
Yeah.
Peterson with
And
how
so you're-
you have been responding. Roger.
Thanks very much. And Kevin
Yeah,
Chan,
your
the
queen is
head of
on.
public policy from Facebook. We've
Black
been talking
square.
about the polls that have been going on live all night. The latest one about first past the post, Trudeau in favor of that. Look at the number.
Yeah, this is a clear preference, right? 83% of Canadians watching today polling think that we should change the system.
Not surprising when you think about what this has been, governments, how important it's been to people for the last few months.
Yeah, sure. So, oftentimes people will say that governance doesn't matter, but when we look at the map and process doesn't matter, we see a clear preference, second highest topic discussed for this election.
All right, an important idea that's been discussed tonight. We'll hear more about it over the next few months. Be sure to, we'll head over now to Gord Martineau. Gord?
Roger, thank you. Be sure to tune in immediately after the debate on the citynews.ca as we explore all the issues on a number of fronts, from how Canadians are responding in person and online, and to our panel of experts. And we hear from Paul Wells, the moderator, about being in the middle of all the action. And that's where
Oh, that's us. See?
now. Our party leaders are
Oh, crazy.
take on the final game.
So that's the Google Hangouts thing?
Yeah, so I'm gonna share this on Facebook.
Neat. I like that.
Welcome back once again to the Maclean's National Leaders Debate. Our final topic for tonight's debate is on foreign policy and security.
If there ever was a distinction between the choices Canada makes abroad and the way we live at home, it vanished last October when loners inspired by international terrorist movements murdered Canadian Forces soldiers in Ottawa and Saint-Jean-sur-Richelieu. Canadians' security is being challenged in Iraq and Syria. Our commitments to our allies are tested in Eastern Europe.
Turn it up on Russia there.
With the United States,
Turn it up on
those
Russia?
rising powers are still another
Well, it says
area
it on my Russia. Turn it up.
in our final
Oh.
segment.
What's that?
We'll discuss Canada in the world.
The debates.
First question on this goes to Tom.
We're streaming ourselves playing chess and watching the debates. Basically,
Oh, wow.
They have also
let's just do what we want to do.
when necessary.
Do what we'll do.
You
point the
should
camera
say
at it.
something cool and funny.
You guys,
Tested in power.
How did you know?
Would the
Oh.
NDP government
What
ever
gave
send
it
troops or
I'll tell you what
generals
gave it
to
away.
combat?
My original art that I've hung on the wall.
Oh,
The-
yeah.
The eccentric religious art that I don't believe in. Yet I hang up for what reason? Let's find out. He's that interesting.
I can't wait to hear about the cell phone.
a clock. Like, who keeps a clock in their
A clock that doesn't work. Why would you have it? He must have a story behind it. Guess what? He doesn't.
Is time forever moving or forever standing still? That's what that clock says to me.
Before I would ever send in our brave
That's clock,
yeah.
There's questions to be asked.
I didn't know that.
People always ask me, do you realize that the cell phones that are smashed over your doorways are put in religious places? And I say, yes, I get it. That's the point of the piece. Fuck.
Get the fuck out.
Do I gotta explain my art to everybody around here?
Everybody get my art?
Can anyone? Oh man, I need to make a moolah. And people are acting like I'm a couple of idiots. Everyone's acting like a couple of idiots.
And France support the mission against
Okay,
ISIS in Iraq.
excellent. I'm happy to start this bite this time.
Is that not a broad enough consensus?
Oh, that's good because it already started, isn't it?
You just did my move. That's exactly how I opened up. You did my move. It's a classic Kenzie gun move. And he copied me.
I didn't realize.
Anyone who's watching the video can rewind it.
So we think that we are
It's a good opener.
we know that a lot of the horrors
Was it exactly that night or was it the other night?
the last next guy.
No, I think it was the
You
exact
opened
same
one
night because
night?
I was like on this side.
Said we were
Oh no, Bob was then. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, we're not so.
seeing the results of that wrong.
You and I
We're
were
not so the same, you and I.
yeah. Same.
After the first 4 moves, you can start.
I was trying to get in your head, you know.
Calling me out for.
I'm just kidding. I'm not trying to get in your head, but I am, you know. But I'm not trying to get in your head. Just kidding. But I am.
The UN sanctioned
Totally, yeah.
approval was
You
the
know what I mean?
responsibility to
But
protect
honestly,
protect
I'm kidding.
civilians
I get it.
in Muammar Gaddafi's Libya from Muammar Gaddafi.
Whoa,
At
dude,
the
we're just
moment
joking. We're just
that
joking.
We're just joking, man. We're just joking. It's just.
Oh, the rebel
Joking.
forces. They're the legitimate new government of Libya. We did that.
Ah,
Full well, those rebel forces included Al Qaeda. I was the only member of parliament who voted against continued bombardment.
There we
But
go.
it seemed pretty clear to me
Oh,
that
it
the
felt
peace
good.
offer on the table, we should take that ceasefire and see if it would
I've
work.
just been chasing
The
around knocks on my back
warehouses
for like the last few days.
Full of arms that belonged to
my
Gaddafi
God.
in Tripoli. And
Did you go to the Swiss again?
ended up being emptied
No,
out
I just got
by
that
the
fucking
hoodlums and terrorists and ended up
Thing.
destabilizing
Phone, too.
Mali. And some of those
So it
very
sounds like
weapons
that.
ended up in the hands of ISIS. So the question is, how could we
But
as a
if you're
country
creative, you can
that
really
has
get
always
fucking
stood for
deputy
peacekeeping
or
and
I always
ceasefires,
wonder, like,
why did every NDP member
can you
vote
do
to
damage
continue
with that
bombardment when everything I just
Always.
said was already clear.
But you also do a lot of good.
Paul, that
Yeah.
The Green Party. Is this a bad idea?
Based on whether or not it was the United Nations mission. And indeed, when it
I don't think it's as bad as like,
more
those footstraps are bad.
it did not. So that shows the
Like
subtlety of our
every dad's chipped their tooth on
This
those
may
things where you stretch your hands and
every
like a
single
thing.
possible
like that.
use of our
Calls it
military.
his dad.
Mr. Harper is in
That's
favor
not
of
true.
every single possible use of our military.
I mean,
We're going to take a balanced approach that will take
vertebrae.
into account traditional Canadian values and multilateralism.
Justin Trudeau,
Would you
one
ask
of
me
the
there?
sort of parties that aren't in
I
government,
moved
asked about
this
what they
poem.
would
Oh, yeah.
use force. Do you think that we need a United Nations mandate before we send Canadian troops abroad?
That,
No, I think it's certainly a
that
clear
phone rolling
indicator
in like a
that we
fucking
should be
2
involved. There are other
8-5-3-5.
situations in which we should. Supported our engagement in Afghanistan, certainly supported our engagement in Kosovo. And the fact is that I'm proud to actually have among us
What a
a
baby.
great team of candidates in the Army who was on the ground in
is it a ponder?
Afghanistan. So the Liberal
Yeah,
Party
probably
knows
to
that
there.
Canada has an important role to play around the world in promoting peace and security. I disagree with the Prime Minister, and his current mission is not that Canada shouldn't have a role against ISIL. I absolutely believe we should. I just
ISIL?
disagree on the approach
Yeah,
that
they
he's
keep
had.
changing it.
Unfortunately, Mr. Harper, as we've well seen, hasn't seen a war he hasn't wanted to get involved in, and that was very clear when he supported the George W. Bush's war into Iraq, where he said in 2003 that Canada should be involved. The fact is, Canada should have a role to
Aha.
play, but it needs to be the right one
Gotcha.
that's going to help the local forces fight and win the war for themselves. And that's why I've consistently supported
Mr. Harper.
training missions, not combat missions.
Mr. Harper, two of your opponents have said you haven't seen a war that you don't like. What do you make of that?
Well, I don't think this government has actually got involved in very
Oh,
many
man,
reactions. We're certainly involved in one now against ISIS.
He seems like a
Islamic
puppet.
State.
You know what I
In
mean?
Iraq
Like, he
and
just
Syria.
seems like a
It's not
puppet.
true what Mr. Mulcair
Yeah,
said.
His actual character.
All of our
Not in the brainwashed
support
Tom Cruise way, but
Not
like,
only our
I think
It's
there's
like watching his body
virtually
move.
all of
It
the
seems like a
countries in
puppet
the
body.
region, the Muslim region support this. The reason they support this
Who's?
is this organization
Yeah.
has become the global nerve center of a
Guy
violent
with the weird
conflict
There's-
that is not
There's
only
something I don't like about his
Centers?
hair because his hair looks like it's like
in Iraq and Syria.
it looks like a piece almost. Or
But it's a
painted
threat to the
on, yeah,
entire
yeah.
region and a threat to the entire globe. It has singled out Canada and Canadians by name, has demonstrated the ability
it has
to
single us
carry
by
out
name.
attacks in
Yeah,
countries
sound like
like
a snake
ours. It
in
would
the
be
head.
absolutely foolish for us not to go after this group before they come after us. Look, I'm very proud of the job the men and women are doing, taking this on in concert with our allies, and I think it is very widely supported by Canadians because they understand it's common sense.
This sounds like something a question one of my colleagues put to you. If not ISIL, then who? When
The Liberal Party has been very clear. We support being part of the coalition
So you-
against
I
ISIL.
moved
We
that
simply
there.
disagree that a bombing mission is the right way to go about it. When the Prime Minister chooses to send men and women of the Canadian forces into harm's way, there has to be a clear plan, there has to be a clear expectation of success, and there has to be a reasonable justification of
Thomas,
specific action.
come
that
at
is
me.
taken. Not just these people are
Come
bad,
at me,
therefore
bro.
we need to do something.
Try
It
to
doesn't
throw
really
in some
matter
of
what.
that sort of
It
talk
means that
while
we
we're
have to be
playing
thoughtful because our allies and quite frankly Canadians
Keep it
expect us
spicy,
to be
maybe
thoughtful
tunes it.
about our approach
Mm.
when we engage in international
Mr.
affairs. And
Trudeau.
the other thing is,
I'll
if we're going
gouge
to
out
send
your
our
eye.
troops overseas, we need to make sure we are properly taking
Oh, yeah,
care
man.
of them when
Live
they
to the
come
world.
home. And Mr. Harper has failed our veterans by nickel and
People are
diming
saying,
them, by not giving
"Oh,
them
man,
the service,
keep
the
it
help
coming.
that they need.
The
And
tweets
it's
are
something that we should all be
rolling.
ashamed of.
Everyone's saying
This
That's
government
gonna
that
be
likes to wrap itself in the flag is actually not caring for those people who have
Okay,
fought,
mine
So, yeah,
injured
you're right.
themselves, and in many cases died
Well,
under
this,
that flag.
this government has made
Or in
record
many
investments
cases,
in veterans. We're
died.
spending 35% more on the average veteran today directly than we were when we came to office. But let me go back to the central question of the ISIS mission. What we are doing in ISIS is precisely the mission that our international allies think we should be doing. These are the priorities. Hit them in the air and help to train people, particularly the Kurds, on the ground. Mr. Trudeau has provided
Yeah, you gotta
rational
train
reason
Kurds.
for why he is against that, other than to simply slag the military
doesn't
when
really
asked
work.
why they shouldn't go there. This is a mission supported by Canadians and our allies, and
Oh,
it
is
is
that one?
in the vital security
And
interests
there's
of
my
this country.
road.
And if you're prime
You-
minister,
you
have
know,
to
you
be
little
able to
traveling
make these
rook,
kinds
huh?
of decisions.
But it's a
You let that
tricky
bulldozer
area.
finish it,
First,
didn't you,
and
huh?
the question of who's our enemy and who's our friend.
When
we're
I
not
went through you like a
considering.
fucking
We don't have
juggernaut.
permission.
You want to
Shell
imitate.
Sound, although when you first sent the permission, we wait for his permission. That was pretty strange because he's a butcher. The civil war that's been waging in Syria has caused massive humanitarian crisis, loss of life, 4 million Syrians taking refuge in neighboring
Trying to
countries.
beef talk, you know.
We stood back and didn't do
Trying to
anything
beef
while that was
talk.
going on.
Oh,
That
my
wasn't
goodness.
ISIS murdering people.
Trying
That
to
was a
talk
civil
like we
war
gotta
where the
beef.
Sunni
Oh
and the Shia
man,
and the factions
I feel like
across
I'm
the world
being so
are
mean.
slaughtering
Wish I
each
had a
other,
beef.
and ISIS is taking advantage of that. Are we on the side of Bashar al-Assad now? Are we going to help bomb ISIS, which we used to? Frankly, there were some people who said ISIS was probably a helpful force because they were against Bashar al-Assad.
Isn't it one of the awful tricks of history that most
Don't
of
go
the
all
most
dude,
precious areas are tricky parts
It's
of the
very
world? I
tricky,
mean,
but that's why we have to
Monday?
look at what ISIS is doing. Why does this group of despicable thugs put their horrific acts on YouTube? Because they want to draw us into the region. They are following a very ancient and not official text of their which they claim is essentially a Muslim book of revelations that will lead them to certain results, but only if infidels are in the right place at the right time for them to attack. So we are actually doing what they want when we go in with bombing missions.
One more question to Mr.
It helps
Mulcahy
them
about my
recruit.
first question about a different part of the world, Ukraine and Eastern Europe. Canada is part of a NATO mission there. NATO's Article 5 says that if a NATO nation is attacked, all NATO nations
When I'm a bishop.
would an NDP government uphold NATO's Article 5 against it?
Of course, Ukraine not being a member of NATO, I'm not sure that the question would pertain. I guess what you're saying is if a NATO
Ukraine's neighbors.
Well, again, we will of course support NATO. We are proud members of NATO, and that's why I made reference earlier to the fact that that should be one of our multilateral cornerstones, whether or not a mission is a NATO mission. And despite what Mr. Harper just said, the mission in Iraq is not a NATO mission.
It looks like he's on E, man.
Full stop. With regard to Ukraine,
I bet it
yes,
gives him fucking shots of vitamin
there's
C or
danger.
something. It's like, man,
We
that's
stand
vitamin C.
firmly with Ukraine against the aggression by Russia, but there are things that Canada can and should be doing.
What is your knee-jerk reaction to this? What is your knee-jerk reaction to this? These are like just brand new issues and all this stuff. What the fuck does ISIS have to do with Canada?
The other is Igor Sechin.
Yeah, it's
Mr.
a
Harper
thing that's
is
happening
sheltering
right
them.
now.
They are not on Canada's list. So my question to you is,
It's kind of like
is
foreign
are these two
policy.
individuals being blocked by all of our allies, and you're giving them a free pass. Well, let me be very
It's like they're just in it to win it, man.
We have sanctions.
Sometimes I get sick of it. Sometimes it makes me want to puke.
But of Ukrainian officials connected with the previous government and Russian officials who were involved in Ukrainian territory. We have, all the allies have slightly different lists because the
When it
objective
comes to politics,
in all of
sometimes
these
I
things
think
is to make
Thomas
sure we do
and
maximum
Steve.
damage to Vladimir Putin
Did-
and the Russian
did you
economy,
Yeah,
and trying to
Justin.
minimize
That's why you
damages
should do
to
what I
all,
do.
where
Make
all
a
of our
difference
allies
this year.
list people
Don't
we
vote.
follow invariably with those
Don't
lists.
vote and
All
don't be a
these two
wimp.
individuals are on the list.
Don't
of
be a
all of
wimp.
our closest
Whoa.
allies. Mr. Harper is refusing them to put them on Canada's list, and now he's refusing to tell Canadians why.
On that note, we're going to wrap up this part of this segment on foreign policy and security, but we're heading into one final round of questions.
She sweeps in and takes a pound. First blood!
How about the first blood?
I
We
like
have
the
to make
first blood.
difficult decisions on issues of war abroad, security at home.
I
Opposing
knew
the
it.
government's decision to take part in
Yeah.
international action against ISIL. in,
Heck, I knew it.
Syria. Supporting the
Yeah.
anti-terrorism legislation
Yeah.
Bill 61 in Parliament, even though you say you would change it later. Why do these issues raise the most persistent questions about your agenda?
Fact is, the government of Canada and the Prime Minister is expected to do two things by Canadians.
It's expected to
The first one is to
do.
keep us safe. The second is to uphold and defend our rights and
His
freedoms.
eyebrows are very
Mr.
bushy
Harper
right here, but
doesn't
then they
think we
thin
need
out.
to do anything more to protect our rights and freedoms. And
See
Mr.
that.
Mulcair, with his position on counterterrorism
Nah,
laws,
eyebrows
doesn't
are
think we
leader.
need to do anything more on security.
Those are
Both
leaders'
parties have been very
eyebrows.
clear. We need to put both of them together. We supported that legislation because there were specific elements in there that immediately and concretely protect Canadian
There you go.
security.
Suck
And
it.
we're committed to repealing the problematic elements that have been highlighted and actually bringing in the proper oversight that our Five Eyes allies all have by elected legislators over
Yep, the
our
Five Eyes
national
allies.
security agencies to make sure that we
That
are
means
protecting also
America,
sunset and
Canada,
clause and making
Australia,
sure that we are
the
narrowing and specifying
UK,
definitions. We managed that committee to encourage the government to bring in significant amendments that removed a number of very problematic elements in it, and we will continue to be productive and constructive in not pretending that there's a political choice.
Okay, Google.
Perhaps it was naive. Perhaps there is
Five Eyes
that I put forward and said, you know what, we can take a responsible position at a time of politics of attack and division.
The Five Eyes refer to an intelligence alliance comprising of Australia,
Mr. Mulcair wants us to be scared for our charter
New
and our
Zealand,
basic
United
rights
Kingdom, and
freedoms.
United States.
The fact is, any Canadian government needs to do them
Nice solid Commonwealth
together,
plus the
and
states.
that is what the
But,
Liberal
you know,
Party
not
has
India and all the other
demonstrated
weird parts of the
years
Commonwealth.
following 9/11.
You know.
That's what we continue to demonstrate.
Oh, good white parts. The Five Eyes. Aye, the Five Eyes.
Well,
The good fellas.
Trudeau explained his
You know,
position. He's
we
been
all know.
for and against the legislation.
What was your
at the
move
same time.
there?
But what I say is this, Paul, our view is very clear that security and freedom go hand in hand. We know
I do love freedom. God damn it, I do.
Security and freedom
is a very serious menace. to
Number
this
one,
country,
freedom. You know what I'm saying?
this country. What
Number
we
one,
did
freedom.
in developing our legislation is we looked at what modern powers, police and security agencies
You
have
falling asleep, Mr.
across
Harper?
our allies.
He's as tired as I am. This is boring as shit.
To those standards. We've also provided
I did not sleep. I was there too.
we have
What did you
our
do?
oversight.
With my
It's not
guy,
having
yeah.
politicians do oversight. We have oversight done by independent experts, by people who are experts in the field, the independent committee,
Holy shit.
and they are chaired,
Experts in the
and those
field.
chaired by
Independent.
prominent former
Experts in the field.
judges.
I like it.
I think that is a robust system.
When
of
you
oversight.
look
parliamentary oversight
exactly
processes like these,
when you look
We're
to the
getting
powers of
change
the
your
reform
mind.
party,
Yeah.
that was what it was all about.
No, I don't support
Justin
this
Trudeau
kind
just
of
starts to
oversight.
yell. He
I
gets all
support
hyper.
parliamentarians' oversight of
Yeah,
legislation. That is
baby.
That
He's
is
such a
our
baby.
Fucking
to
take the
draft
tantrum.
laws.
Come on, come on, you
When
baby.
it comes to the operations of government, the operations of
Don't be a
security agencies,
baby.
I don't think those things should be politicized or done by politicians. I think they should be done by experts
There is
and
no-
by judges who
there
protect
is
our
no
rights, and that's
expert
what's being done.
There is no expert oversight of C-51. There's no oversight at all. And if you listen to security experts, and I urge anyone watching to go online and find the evidence of Joe Fogarty, who was an MI5
Oh, what a
agent
horsey.
from the UK doing liaison intelligence work with Canada. This C-51 Anti-Terrorism Act makes us less safe. It is not confronting terrorism. It is very likely to make us less able to disrupt plots, while at the same time eroding our freedoms. And under Joe Fogarty's evidence under oath was that this legislation is dangerous, and that when asked by contacts and colleagues in the UK, is there anything Canada is doing that the UK should emulate? He said, absolutely not. They're sitting on a tragedy waiting to happen.
Tom Mulcair, I suspect you have some
hysterical.
She is hysterical. Women get that way.
We have to.
It's
whoever
okay
runs
though.
government, Make sure that
Maybe
we
it's
protect
that
Canadians
time of the
from
month
terrorism.
or
There's no
something.
I had to just daze out when they're talking.
We strongly
Exactly.
that you have to do that without trampling on the rights and freedoms of Canadians. Now, when a
So what
series
you gonna
of
do?
prime
What
ministers,
you gonna
justices,
run
top
when
legal experts,
He usually wear glasses.
all concur.
No,
Bill
no, he doesn't.
C-51
But
represents
his
real
eyes
right
are bugged out like a goddamn kitten.
with nothing in return, because there's nothing in there that wasn't already captured by existing legislation. Then we have one clear answer to the Canadian voting public. The
Claire's trying to go
NDP
more
will
party boy
repeal
than Trudeau.
Bill C-51.
Fucking evil
Well, this
boy.
is
And not
this is
introduce
an
any legislation to give any new tools to police or to citizens.
if
Like
there
me, I'm
is evidence that
bring a
something's
meeting.
missing, for example, the Conservatives left
that for
completely
you.
silent on the question of domestic radicalization. And the problem is, of course, some of the code words used by the Conservatives has been very.
That would make him
For
cool.
example,
It makes him look
President
cool.
Obama will talk about working with houses of worship and religious leaders. Mr. Harper points out and singles out mosques. He knows why he's using that language. He has a backbencher who said that Muslim women should get the hell back where they came from, and he's about to sign that person's nomination.
He's
I
calling
find
it.
that reprehensible and beneath the dignity of a Canadian Prime Minister.
Mr. Harper, are you using code words against Thomas?
Absolutely not. Look, Mr. Mulcair's mantra, the NDP's mantra is the same on this every single time. Every piece of security legislation ever presented before the NDP. We have done in security legislation are things allowing security organizations to share information on terrorist threats, allowing them to intervene before possible to prevent the very kind of thing that happened in Saint-Jean in October. It is important, I believe it is, that we call the international jihadist threat exactly what it is. And anyone who thinks that is somehow legally Islam, the Muslims are the vast majority of victims of this movement. Muslim minorities are a particular focus of our international efforts to make sure we protect people, not just in this country, but around the world. If you're not prepared to call the threat we face by the name it is, you are not prepared to confront it, and we need to confront it as a country.
C-51 does not do the things the Prime Minister just said. This legislation fails, as Mr. Mulcair said, to bring in any efforts. The UK have brought in their legislation to confront the risk of radicalization. We can abort terrorist plots without C-51. We've got the C-18 in Toronto. We arrested young people who were not legal on that was all before C-51 was passed. C-51 creates a secret police under CSIS with no reporting requirements to the RCMP, none. And it will create separate security espionage groups, not knowing what the other is doing. This legislation must be repealed, but it should go back. Look at the recommendations of anyone here, and I hope to be playing a key role in the next parliament. Must look at the recommendations for the Air India inquiry, the former Justice John Major. Must look at the recommendations for the Marara inquiry and use those recommendations as the basis for drawing up legislation that will work. This is a disaster.
Listen, I want to come back on C-51. I'm surprised by the reaction to your stance. Liberal members setting up their party cards, Liberal members leaving your party to support the RPP over this issue.
No, I think this is an issue that people are quite rightly worked up about. There's an awful lot of fear and division going on in politics these days, and one of the things that the Liberal Party is focused on is taking responsible decisions. And that means there will be people disagreeing on the left and on the right with our position. I'm fairly confident.
Who gives a shit, Justin?
We have the right position. We need to talk a lot
You're a baby.
about addressing radicalization, working with various communities.
I don't talk to babies.
We are engaging in the kind of counter-radicalization that in a country like Canada, particularly a country that is so strong, in spite of our differences, but because of those differences, we need to pretty boy like that. What does it do with talk like that?
Yeah, I want to fuck him. He gave me my prime minister. I can't want to fuck my prime minister. I want to stick it in his hole. And it's hard for me to handle. Think about that. Makes a bit ugly. like Harper. I don't think about sticking in Harper's delicious corner hole.
No, he's a safe man.
I don't think he has the anatomy. I think he likes it. Which one? Nice. Okay. Deal with it, he says. Well, maybe I will.
Well, you should.
In my own way. No.
There's a video too.
Yeah, she's good.
Mr. Harper's approach has left us and that's stage. For the first time since the United Nations created Canada missed its turn on the Security Council. And by the way, Mr. Harper, we weren't thrown out by dictatorships. We were thrown out by longtime allies like Portugal and Germany, who simply don't recognize the Canada that you're projecting onto the world stage. We can get back to a Canada that's respected on issues of international aid and development. We'll put back the international aid budgets that Mr. Harper has cut. We'll protect, defend, and promote those Canadian values on the international stage. We also will start to respect our international obligations. Stop working against the world. Start working for the planet. I would love nothing more than, as Prime Minister next December, to go to the International Conference on Climate Change in Paris and to do just that. Get us on track to deal with the very real issue of climate change.
Oh, he was, yeah, he's like, Duffy.
Bring it up. It's like, hey, you know,
also, I'm on my free trip to Paris.
Come on, Canada is the most admired, country in the world because we take strong stands, we do what we believe is right. Now let's talk about the Security Council of the United Nations. There is a movement at the United Nations to isolate and denigrate the state of Israel. This government has taken a very clear position. We will not support that. It is wrong. This is the only country in the world whose existence is under threat. It is a friend, an ally, one of the best friends and ally, the best friend and ally this country has.
We've got
in a
30
very
seconds and we
dangerous
cannot
reason,
go
and we
over.
will
Tom
never
Mulcair,
go
very briefly,
along with that
Justin
anti-Israel
Trudeau,
position.
I'll take no lessons from on defending the right of Israel to defend itself. But we also take a very balanced approach. We want a safe state for Palestinians and a safe state for Israelis. That's a balanced approach. That's the type of approach Canada's always taken on the world stage. That's the approach that we will
All
take.
parties are in agreement on this. We've been talking about international relations. We have the worst relationship with the United States that we've had in a long time. That's what we need to fix as well.
We have covered so much ground over the last 2 hours, and now it's time to wrap things up with some closing remarks. Each leader will have 2 minutes.
He's a
and we
feisty
begin.
pawn.
Thank you, Paul. Ladies and gentlemen, this election is about
No,
proof of experience to keep Canada safe.
But Justin is a feisty pawn.
We know that beyond our shores, the global economy
Yes, he's a
remains in
feisty
state of
pawn.
turmoil and uncertainty. We have falling oil prices, we have market turmoil in China, we have yet another debt crisis in Europe. Through it all, since the end of the global financial crisis, we have the best economic growth, the best job creation, and the best growth in middle-class incomes among any of the advanced developed nations, while other countries are descending into spirals of debt and deficit with tax hikes and cuts to their programs and services and economic stagnation. In this country, we have a balanced budget, lower taxes, increased money for the things that matter, transfers for healthcare, education, for infrastructure, and for benefits for families like yours. The other parties want a different course. They would replace our low tax balanced budget plan. They want to spend tens of billions of dollars additional in permanent spending to be financed by high taxes, permanently higher taxes, and permanent deficits. They would take away, in whole or in part, your universal child care benefit, income splitting for families and seniors, and tax-free savings accounts. They would hike taxes on business and on workers through increases, tax increases on the Canada Pension Plan, tax increases to employment insurance, and a carbon tax. Countries that have gone down the road with higher taxes and permanent deficits are failing around the world. You know that today there has been and there is no better place, better prospects for your family. October the 19th, I asked for your support, so together.
Yeah! Hello, sailors.
I'd like to begin by thanking the organizers of this debate. And thank all of you at home for joining us in the summer. In this election, there is a choice. 4 more years of Stephen Harper's conservative or my plan for positive change. Under Mr. Harper's plan, incomes stagnant, household debt skyrocketing. Mr. Harper has the worst job record since the 70s. He's run up 8 deficits in a row and added $150 billion. These values, Mr. Harper's plan clearly the list of conservative operatives under our CFP investigation is continuing to grow. Some have even been sent to jail. The biggest risk in Canada is 4 more years.
Thomas Mulcair, baby!
Change that's built on hard work, living within means and accountability. These are the values that have guided my 35 years of public service, and these are the values that will continue to guide me.
Fuck up, you're not hocus pocus.
My number one priority is kickstart the economy and get Canadians
I'm
working.
not interested.
Local infrastructure and help small businesses to
But
create
maybe
jobs.
I will vote for him.
And we understand that good jobs and a clean environment go hand in hand.
It might be,
I
man. I'm not
have
sure.
fought
Oh
for
gosh,
Canada my whole
it's
life.
tough. And these elections are, these debates aren't
the
helping.
greatest country in
Pretty
the
much
world.
going to watch and see
But a
what
lot
the
has
polls
been
are
lost.
saying, whoever
The conservatives.
the
I
population
have the
is
experience to replace Mr. Harper
well, jump, I
and the
guess.
plan to repair the damage that he
I
has.
got a lot of my
Canadians
sleeves.
are ready for change. We're ready too. I invite
It
you.
also sucks for us since we
Join
can't be
us.
as strategic as like the West Coast.
Thank you,
So
Tom
it's
Mulcair.
happening on the East Coast.
And the next
Accordingly.
round of closing remarks go to Elizabeth May.
Thank you, and I also want to thank Maclean's and Rogers. This May, as we currently stand here on August 6th, be the only debate that involves all of us in an English language debate, and maybe we won't get a French language debate. So I appreciate the opportunity to speak directly to Canadians. I want to say that it will be a shame if we don't have more debates, because as comprehensive as the questions were, we have not discussed social policy. We have not discussed how we respond to the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. We've not discussed how we must expand our Medicare system to include pharmacare, what we should do for young people who are facing crushing levels of student debts and their families. We have a lot of issues to discuss. Inequality. Everyone's talking about the middle class, and I support the concern. But the 86 wealthiest families in this country have the same combined wealth as the 11.4 million Canadians at the bottom. 1/3 of Canadians have the combined wealth as the top 86 families. We have to address this. So I ask you to consider the Green Party. I ask you to get to know us. We are not what you think. We're not a one-issue party. We're certainly not a one-person party. I'm enormously proud to be joined by Deputy Leader, Member of Parliament for Thunder Bay Superior North, Bruce Hire, by Deputy Leader Daniel Green in Quebec. We have exemplary candidates from coast to coast to coast. People like Claire Martin in North Vancouver. People like Gord Miller, former Environment Commissioner for Ontario and Guelph. We're running strong candidates to be strong MPs because we want to work for you. We want to go to work for you in a more collaborative parliament, one with greater respect, with civility in our discourse, willing to work across party lines to deliver what Canadians want. We believe in a Canada that works. We believe in a Canada that works together for all of us. Help us now. This is the election where we will get our country back.
Yeah, we can.
Thank you, Elizabeth May. I've almost never seen a bunch of politicians stick to their time as well as these ones are doing, and I very much appreciate it. Justin Trudeau, you get the last word.
Mr. Harper has spent millions of dollars on attack ads, trying to convince you that I'm not ready for this job.
You're young, you're
As soon
baby.
as they are,
Yeah, baby. So, baby.
you decide whether someone is ready to be your prime minister.
Baby.
Here's what I
Let's say it's that baby.
Hey,
in order
baby.
to know if someone is ready
Yeah,
for this
baby
job.
here.
Ask them what they want to do
Oh, big baby.
with this job. Why they want it in the first place.
Your
A
dad
43-year-old father of 3 kids.
Because my dad owns the country. I think I
I
deserve
want
it.
them to grow up in the best country in the world, one that we can all be proud of. I learned from my father that to lead this country, you need to love this country. Love it more than you crave power. It needs to run through your veins. You need to feel it in your bones. Mr. Harper and I part ways on many issues, but our differences go deeper than just policy. Mr. Harper is dead wrong about one thing. He wants you to believe that better just isn't possible. Well, I think that's wrong. We are who we are.
I missed that one. Oh, you
Canada
did that.
is what it is. Because in our hearts, we've always known that better is always possible. An economy that works for the middle class means a country that works for everyone. A country that is strong not in spite of our differences, but because of them. The world needs more.
The
of
old
both
switcheroo,
things.
huh?
After 10 years of Mr. Harper, so do we.
Oh, freeze.
That's why I'm in this. That's why I want to be your prime minister.
Thank you,
Oh,
Mr.
I'm
Trudeau.
sorry, I wasn't listening.
This concludes
What?
the first
I
debate of
couldn't
this
get 2
campaign.
shit, sorry. What?
This whole experiment was a bit of a new experience for everybody concerned, and I want to thank the leaders for the leap of faith that they showed when they agreed to participate. Good luck on the campaign trail to all of you. On behalf of Maclean's, City, and Omni, I want to thank the viewers at home and online for
Maclean City.
tuning in tonight. Be sure to visit the Maclean's
Never heard of
website
that
for
city.
complete coverage of this campaign. Please stay tuned on Omni. I'm heading over there right now for the City News Special. Your vote, your future.
The city of
I'm
Maclean.
Paul Wells. Good night from Toronto.
That was great. That really.
Yeah, my mind is broadened for sure.
He's got a good track record on spotting when this country is in a recession.
You have completely become disconnected from the reality that people are facing right across the country.
And I'll tell you what won't grow our economy. The kinds of plans these guys are presenting.
Put to the test.
Whoever gave you the advice that simply announcing you
I'll
would
tell you
appoint
what won't
senators
have a
as
country.
constitutional
This
people
guy's
back to
shit.
law school.
There's old
And
dummy.
issues that will unite us.
What we're seeing here tonight is that you're going to do everything you can to hang on to
It
your
is
job.
30 minutes, all right?
Or
Divide
divide
us.
us.
Bastard.
The only two people
Mm.
I know in Canada who are anxious to start talking about separatism again, Justin Trudeau.
You know what? I just did eat tonight, and I like
The
it,
election
Justin.
campaign in recent history
Hey, he's
intensified.
pretty cute, that
Mr.
Justin.
Harper has failed our veterans by nickel and diming them.
This is your vote.
That is the record of the NDP. They're always for projects until they actually face one.
This is your future.
Honestly,
I always
Mr.
thought that was a weird
Harper
thing to
really
say.
can't afford another 4 years.
We have a
Good evening. Is the debate over, or has it just begun? From the issues.
I don't know. I just got here.
We take
Has it
from the
just
coast.
begun?
Those Canadians
How you
do
would
their
tell
take
them.
in
What time
person
did it
and
start?
online.
You're
Let's
being
thank
so
our panel
cryptic.
of experts and City News political specialist Cynthia Mulligan.
Thank you, Gord. I am joined by some esteemed political analysts from Ottawa. We have Cormac McSweeney, who is the Parliament Hill Bureau Chief for 680 News. We have John Geddes from Maclean's. You are the Ottawa Bureau Chief. And Justin Lane from Vice, parliamentary correspondent. So I'm going to start with you, Justin.
Nice.
Silverman.
Silverman.
This is gonna be an unsatisfying response, but
Yeah.
really, in a way, they all won. They all did. Kind of nobody won, everybody won. The secret is that campaigns don't necessarily want to win. Thomas Mulcair probably had the expectation of coming out
Yeah.
and just eviscerating his opponents. He didn't do that. He looked strong on certain issues, looked weaker on other parts, looked a little confused, a little vague in some parts. But Trudeau needed to see expectations.
So that-
He did.
yeah, you
Harper
moved.
needed to stay standing. He did. May needed to kind of get a word in edgewise and make her points. Insert herself in the debate. She did that.
She was
All-
very articulate.
Exactly. They all played up their strengths. They played down their weaknesses. They managed to highlight their opponent's weaknesses. I think they all did their job. What comes out in the wash, I think, is to be determined for tomorrow.
So has anything changed? Bill?
I don't know. I think that there'll be, if you think about who had something to lose here, pretty surely Stephen Harper was the guy. He knew he was going to be under attack, and he was under attack more than any of the other leaders on the stage. And I don't think he came away from it bleeding. I think he came away from it standing, looking fairly solid on most of the sections. Probably strongest, I thought, in the democracy section, which honestly I thought would be his weakest section going into this, just because he was seemed so vulnerable in the Senate. Elizabeth May was interesting, wasn't she? She can tend to ramble at times, but she didn't tonight. She was quite focused and precise, and it was impossible not to want to listen to her, even though, really, factually, she doesn't really have the same political standing as the other people who are up there behind the podium.
You can tell that she was ready for this debate. She was ready to go at Harper, as she had in the past in 2008 when she took part in that debate, and then she was shut out in 2011. She wanted a chance to redeem herself with this one. I think she did, but she also was able to go
Isn't that pretty,
after
man?
and Thomas Mulcair, which is where she's going to sway some voters. It's going to be one of the battlegrounds.
It's got Mr. Potato Head skin.
Battle with the NDP. They're going to try to take seats from him. She needed to go
This
after
guy's got a
Mulcair,
weird
especially
bowl
on
cut, and he's got no sideburns.
pipeline. She did.
Trudeau was more
Just like straight, nothing, almost nothing below the
Put on his
glasses.
So let's look at an exchange
Yeah.
between Trudeau
The
and
best guy is
So it's
what?
like a bowl and straight across the.
For 10 years,
Oh!
the approach that
Oh, there's
Mr. Harper has
cutbacks.
taken is simply not
It's over,
working
right?
for Canadians.
Yeah.
He has
I'm
consistently chosen to
Right.
give opportunities and tax breaks and benefits to the wealthiest Canadians in the hopes that that would create growth. But that's not happening, and that actually goes to the heart of the question that's being posed in this election campaign. Is Stephen Harper's plan working for you? He took a decade of surpluses and turned it into 8 consecutive deficits. We're the only country in the G7 that's in recession right now. He has no plan to get out of it. And we just found out that wages are falling as well. You may not feel that from 24 Sussex, but I know you feel that at home.
So interesting. I mean, Harper really was.
Oh, he knows how I feel at home. He's my prime minister, and he knows how I feel. Not yet.
Fumbling.
Soon.
We couldn't expect to make an opening gap, and they must have opened at some point to still weaker, less prime ministerial than either of our guys. I don't think until maybe his closing statement where I thought he was oddly mannered and slow in his delivery.
Oh, Trudeau. These things happen. Those things happen.
At the beginning, it was very, very particular. It was very concise and very specific. And he, you know, the other good aspect is getting some very serious things.
No,
I think he
that's about to.
I think everything.
That's the vice guy. The guy listening to vice guy. He's the vice guy.
Not balanced. You know, job creation numbers are stagnant. I think if they can keep hitting those
Nazi
points,
haircut.
keep hitting the prime minister with them, he's gonna be in real trouble. I don't think he properly inoculated himself
Lumber.
against them tonight.
Interesting, Justin, we had Mulcair and Harper, just the way the podiums were set up, side by each. Those of us who watched them going at it in Parliament were must have been thinking, well, okay, that's good positioning for them to have some more. I didn't think
You
really
got
there
it.
was much fireworks between them. There was some good change.
Well, that's intentional. The NDP propagandists that I spoke to before the debate told me this is not the question of hearing they want it to be.
They wanted to see more
Propaganda.
less pugnacious, right?
I was surprised at how long it took.
Oh, that's been going
Mulcair to
around.
really
People have
hit
been
his
saying
stride. We all went,
pugnacious.
there he is.
Oh, yeah,
Let's listen to
pugnacious.
that for just one moment.
Pugnacious as fuck.
Mulcair on the environment.
God damn it, God damn it.
So fucking pugnacious.
With regard to energy east, it could be a win-win-win. Better price for the producers, more royalties for the producing province. It could also help create those jobs in Canada. And of course, it could help with Canada's own energy security. But here's the rub. Mr. Harper has gotten the balance all wrong. He has scrapped a series of important environmental laws, starting with the Navigable Waters Protection Act. Species at risk has been affected. Fisheries.
Cormac, your thoughts?
Well, I'm going to start.
Is my face on the white square?
Too hard.
No, it's on your own
Look how to
color.
act, have a smile.
Looking into the camera too much.
Yeah, definitely. Yes. So it came off as kind of fake almost in a way. He was trying a little bit too hard. And then I think he dropped that as he got a little bit later into the debate. And he started to become a Mulcair we actually know and see in question period, as John was mentioning a little bit earlier. And that's when he really hit his stride. That's when he really started to go after people, yet also make his point effective and get his message across.
Mulcair's a nerd at the end of the day. He wants to be able to stand up there and recite the most intricate levels of policy and those intricate levels of his experience and his research and everything he's crammed into his big egghead. And that's what he got to do there.
I'm an egghead.
And he got to clobber the prime minister by saying,
That's
you
funny.
failed here, you failed here, you failed here. And he got to make a very coherent point in that we should be keeping energy jobs here in Canada rather than exporting them to China or the US.
You see the exasperated look on Harper's face though as he looked over at Mulcair. That's to me, that's sort of a classic sort of thing about their relationship, eh? Mulcair hammering, Harper looking on, working up the sky.
So there was a really interesting exchange between Trudeau and Mulcair on national unity, where Mulcair was goading Trudeau. So we're going to pull that clip up, and it's about another national referendum, sovereignty +1. So let's listen to that for a moment. And Trudeau's interesting response.
Mr. Trudeau has an obligation, if he wants to talk about the subject, to come clean with Canadians. What's his number? What is your number, Mr. Trudeau?
But first of all, Mr. Mulcair, I don't question your patriotism.
You have an answer.
The question is, why
Let's
is
say
your
go.
policy so reckless? You want to
This same debate or these flashbacks?
These are flashbacks. They already said this.
She has like a filter on it.
Justices said one
Yeah, they
vote
should
is
say
not
that.
enough to break up this country, and yet that is Mr.
Reporter.
Mulcair's position. He wants to be prime minister of this country, and he's choosing to side with the separatist movement in Quebec and not with the Supreme Court of Canada. And he's bringing this up. It's his policy to repeal the Clarity Act. He quietly put forward a bill in the House of Commons on that. He announced
It's
it
really
very
secret when
loudly
you put it in the House of
French.
Commons.
He very loudly announced it in French 6 weeks ago at the
Come on, you gotta move in you somewhere, eh? I believe in you, eh?
Yeah, well, what Trudeau got to do here, he got to play very specifically to Montrealers and Ontarians, especially those with the last referendums. And Harper then got to jump in and say, let's not even bother talking about this. And let's move on.
Again, I think that was his best segment, and he was passionate about the unity question, and he really came through on that.
That's not talking.
We have so much more to talk about. We haven't even covered off Elizabeth May yet, or their comments on terrorism. We will have that for you in our next chat. Right now, though, Gord, it is back to you.
All right, Cynthia, thank you. We have been coast to coast all night, watching the discussion unfold as the gloves drop. Live now, St. John's Newfoundland is out there. here at Memorial University, wrapping up for the night, but not until telling us who they think stole the show.
None of the party leaders have really talked about post-secondary education, and coming into this election debate, from coast to coast to coast, I think we're looking for some commitments on building a stronger economy. We can't be talking about building a stronger economy without talking about investments in post-secondary education.
But they haven't told us why their opinions matter, why we should vote with them. However, I do think Elizabeth May has brought forward some good ideas, except we should interrupt him and think that Thomas Mulcair has really done a good job at staying on the party line.
It's kind of difficult to be talking about the federal election and to be talking about the economy and talking about the fact that unemployment is twice the national average.
And speaking of coast to coast, Twitter has been heating up across the Maclean gang is here now. Back now.
Well, that's right, Gordon. I am here with Steve Lever.
Welcome to my mind, man.
Not shy whatsoever.
Yeah, if you look at this chart, you can really see the conversation thing about that. Twitter's good at a lot of things, but one thing it's really, really great at is that live real-time conversation. So when you look at this, you see almost 200,000 tweets while the debate was happening. Those are people sending messages. They're talking to each other about what they thought was important. All these things happening as they're watching, sitting on their couch, seeing what somebody else is saying, commenting on what the leaders are saying. Powerful, it's quick, and it's happening right there. You can see that huge inflection in activity.
You see the massive spikes here. Now, this is across Canada, of course.
And around the world. You were looking at maps earlier, you can see people tweeting in Australia, in Germany, England. You could be anywhere and watching it online, of course. So people that would have been restricted in how they watch it before can now be part of the conversation.
Pretty incredible. Let's break it down a little bit further and see what's happening with these leaders. Because going into the debate, Elizabeth May was really nowhere to be seen originally.
Yeah, and this is incredible when you look at this. Because what you're seeing is, she ended the debate tied with Trudeau for the share in conversation. Less people mentioning her name, essentially. When she went into this debate, she was nowhere to be seen. And as she made her opening statement, all of a sudden, we're like, wait a minute, let's talk about Elizabeth May a little bit more here.
That's right.
And you see where she ended up, actually very, very high. And she charted consistently through the night. She stayed there. Basically trading support and seeing where people talk less about him. Again, that's all they talked about. She took some of that voice away from him.
Interesting. We're seeing this all happen in real time. Justin Trudeau, any surprises that he a lot of people want to know about him.
Yeah, I think you're looking for big movements either way to see that sort of momentum. It looks like he went in with the expectations where they were. They just kind of stayed where they were. No major moments, no ups or downs, nice and steady, which is probably okay. But I think if you're Elizabeth May, you're thinking it's a pretty good showing for a debate that you weren't sure about. It gives you good ammunition going into the others that you're not invited to. All of a sudden make a case that, hey, maybe I should be invited to these things.
Absolutely. And finally, let's look at it even closer, because when you look at some of those peak moments, where you see where the green is, that's Elizabeth May. That's people actually tweeting about her and the Green Party.
Yeah, it's amazing. So you can see right there where she's like, all of a sudden she makes her opening statement, and everybody is like, this is something we should be paying attention to. And then you can see with the other leaders all the way through the debate, different spikes. So the big green spike you see at the end is her closing statement, of course. But the middle one is we're talking about stability and pluralism. Isn't it interesting that people are saying,
it's on Twitter and Facebook.
When going into the debate, it was all economy.
Right.
But when you look at the big inflection points, it was the stability in parliament, and the last big spikes at the end were about the isolation, and that's again where people started talking about.
Well, you see the red spike as well. Okay, so Justin Trudeau talking about security, and people seem to really respond to that.
Yeah, and what's interesting here, this is just people mentioning them too. So being mentioned doesn't always mean they're saying fantastic things about you. It could be, I can't believe somebody just said that, or those sorts of things as well. So it's just showing that there's this enthusiasm, and sort of enthusiasm is not the right word, but a passion for what somebody's saying at that moment that they feel that they need to talk about it as well.
What's interesting is that we're just going to go right to the back here. Actually, before we go to this, we're going to go to Roger Peterson, who is standing by. He's getting some Facebook reaction. We continue the social media reaction online. We're going to you, Roger.
All right, thanks very much, Melody. Kevin Chan joining us from Facebook today. Head of public policy there. It's been an interesting night, Kevin. And start of the night, we had a poll that said, who should be the leader? We want to see as a prime minister. Right. And Mulcair was at the front. And now we've got that second poll at the end of it. Where are we now?
And we see that numbers largely stay the same. Mr. Mulcair has maintained his lead in the polls. But really the big difference here is Elizabeth May, who's really sort of jumped a bit in terms of the polls and sort of seems to have come out of the crowd and really stood out.
And it might be because of this. We had a Facebook moment. We'll explain a little more. But here's the Facebook moment. It spiked into a spike.
with all due respect, Mr. President, the only way you can take credit for the emissions problems only occurred in 2008 and 9 is the global financial crisis. That's the only thing that brought down our emissions. They would have gone up much more than they have now if not for the action of Ontario and shutting down coal-fired power plants in British Columbia, bringing in carbon tax. The cold, cruel reality is that under your watch, greenhouse gases have been rising, carbon pollution has been rising.
And they'll have an answer to that.
Began to recover in 2009.
Or you can save your horse.
Yeah, I could.
And that was the spike in the conversations. First of all, what is the spike when we're talking about those conversations?
So we're looking at the conversations of all Canadians on Facebook, watching this debate, and the spike is really a moment where a lot of people are really engaging. Last moment in time during the debate, we saw a spike in activity on Facebook.
And what do you think, man, led to that with that quote there, that clip?
Yeah, I mean, there could be a lot of reasons. It could be the nature of what he's talking about. So this kid was talking about greenhouse gas emissions in Canada and how they
good.
wrong and it coincides with
I just moved there.
also be that Liver May, as an individual, as a leader on stage, really stood out among the 4 leaders. So that's a really interesting insight. We're getting this in real time, real conversations with Canadians across the country.
Okay, Kevin, thanks very much. We'll talk again in just a little bit, but let's go live now to Tom Holland.
Many Canadians are afraid that they will outlive their money and they want access to pension savings vehicles. Would your government support an Ontario pension fund?
Well, Michael, as you saw this evening, that was one of the subjects we didn't get to, and it's always been a great concern to me when you see something like a bankruptcy.
Didn't you say that already?
or
Or something else?
You watch a lot of pensioners lose their money because they've invested in foregone wages, and then we don't have protection in case of bankruptcy and insolvency. So that's something we clearly have to work on. Yes, I think that Ontario is right to try to do something to help pensioners have a decent
I
retirement.
moved my knife from here to here.
To be the NDP government that does that with them. In other words, I think that the federal government can work hard in consultation with the provinces and territories to increase the CPP and work with Quebec that has its own system, the QPP. We don't reinvent the wheel. As a matter of public administration, we try to use what's already there. Thank you. Oui.
Merci. Me donner un peu de contenu francophone. Avez-vous réalisé, quand M. Harper l'a dit, que vous veniez de lui faire admettre qu'on est presque en récession?
Oui, je me suis rendu compte que M. Harper a admis ce soir que nous étions en récession. C'était un aveu important. Je me souviens, quand j'étais étudiant en droit, on nous disait qu'un aveu, c'est la meilleure forme de preuve. So yes, we realized this evening that Mr. Harper is now willing to admit that we're in a recession, and as they taught us in law school, an admission is the best form of evidence, so he admitted it.
Et quel bilan vous tirez de cette expérience de 2 heures sur le plateau? Est-ce que vous êtes satisfait?
C'était mon premier débat des chefs. Alors, c'était assez ouvert à un ensemble de sujets. J'ai beaucoup aimé l'expérience et je pense que c'est on a réussi à préparer on voulait on était capable de remplacer la politique d'honneur de l'Union avec une politique positive, optimiste de ce qu'on peut réussir ensemble. Et le point où on voit l'expérience et le leadership nécessaire pour le faire, M. Harper, et pour le remplacer avec un gouvernement social-démocrate des droits de l'homme. I think that we achieved what we set out to achieve.
Come at me, bro.
We have the leadership and the experience to replace Stephen Harper's politics.
It's a horrible idea.
And I'm convinced that we did that in a debate that covered a pretty wide range of topics. And it was my first debate as party leader. I enjoyed the experience, and I'm sure that there's going to be a lot more exercises of this nature between now and the election.
Est-ce que c'est pas surprenant que la question du Québec est
I'll send a goddamn
dans un débat entre anglophones finalement?
Mais vous savez, M. Trudeau avait une question simple à laquelle il était obligé de répondre. Il doit ça au Canadien, il était incapable de dire son chiffre. Il peut bien dire qu'il n'aime pas la position du NPD qui existe pourtant depuis 10 ans. Notre position.
Welcome back to our analyst panel. We are joined again with some more discussion on the ins and outs of this. Terror did come up. We knew that it was going to.
I played splat in your will.
Fear factor and talk about how he had to be the one sticking
Extreme.
the best protect us from global terrorism. And he had an interesting exchange with Trudeau that will run right now, and Harper defending why Canada is involved in the war on terror abroad.
Holy hell! Actually got involved very many military actions, but we're certainly involved in one now against ISIS, the so-called Islamic State, in Iraq and Syria. So for what Mr. Harrison thought, shut the fuck up. All of our NATO allies support this, and not only our NATO allies, virtually all of the countries in the region, the Muslim region, support this. The reason they support this is this organization has become the global nerve center of a violent jihadist movement that is not only threatening, literally slaughtering hundreds of thousands of people in Iraq and Syria before we but it's a threat to the entire region and a threat to the entire globe. It has singled out Canada and Canadians by name and has demonstrated the ability to carry out attacks in countries like ours. It would be absolutely foolish for us not to go after this before they come after us.
I thought that was his most real intense moment.
Yeah, I thought he was very strong. I thought I think Canadians actually buy that. Canadians buy the big person wild. Selling what is totally the biggest genocidal force in the world. I think Canadians remember Rwanda. They remember the liberal leader at the time, doing it. And I think Canadians look at this and they buy our groups and fight them. It's a sort of issue. It's so opposite. It's not true of every issue. It's kind of foreign issues. There's a natural tendency for people to want to hear what the city minister says and to get down on us for the benefit of the doubt that he's seeing things with us from the silver line. I think Marvel plays that one pretty well. Going back to 2014 show, tends to do well, tends to pick up when international news is in the air. Does record well. Message is our he said this right at the start when he was standing in front of Rito Hall. He said this is going to be about two things, the economy and national security. And he's focused on that. He really wanted to hit home with this topic, discussing the mission against ISIS as well as the C-51 defending that against the onslaught from the other leaders. But he stood his ground on this. He's very passionate about it. I think he scored a lot of points. And he also really did spell it out when he said, if you want to be Prime Minister, you have to make these tough decisions.
That was a good moment to use. Okay, we are going to wrap this up for now. We will be back with more of this discussion right now. I'm turning it over to Tammy Sutherland, who is at the Seneca College with the Youth Vote for Foreign Policy. Tammy.
Thanks very much, Cynthia. Yeah, the final issue in the debate tonight was foreign policy and national security, an issue that has definitely gained more traction ever since the two terror attacks on Canadian soil this past fall. I'm joined now live by Movement Shade. He's a former counterterrorism operative with CSIS as well as the RCMP. Thank you so much for joining us. You definitely have a unique perspective on this topic. And for those who are not familiar, give us a little bit of your background.
I'm born and raised in Toronto, Canada. Went through a period of radicalization. 9/11 actually made me rethink my views. Went to Syria, de-radicalized, came back to Canada, became an operative for CSIS, began a number of infiltration operations, and one of which moved on to become the Toronto 18 terrorism case.
Okay, we're going to come back to it. We're just going to actually throw it to Great Party Leader Elizabeth May, who's just come to the podium to speak.
A very positive experience, and I think with the other leaders, we displayed an ability to discuss issues in, for the most part, a civil fashion. And I'm open to any questions you might have. How do you think you did tonight? Oh, my daughter says I did great. And I had an email from my brother in Cape who said I won the debate. So I'm just very pleased with being able to communicate clearly on a wide range of subjects. If nothing else, I hope I demonstrated for Canadians that the Green Party is not a one-issue party. Well, we're running in 338, so somewhere shy of that. I think realistically we can win many more seats than we have now. I'm not prepared to put a number on that because I'm a little bit superstitious, I should say. But I'm very confident we'll win a good number of seats and in a minority parliament, which is the point I was trying to make tonight as often as I could. In a minority parliament, a group of members of parliament in a party that's prepared to be collaborative and cooperative can actually make the difference between an insecure, fractious 2-year parliament and a productive, hard-working 4-year parliament. So in a parliamentary democracy, a group of green MPs elected in this next election will change the nature of Parliament, as well as the quality of government. Any other? Yes.
Um,
I get it now. Okay. In 2011, a lot of this debate revolved around the issue of coalition. We didn't see that tonight. Why do you think that is? In 2008, we actually didn't discuss a coalition in the actual debate. Okay. And in 2011, of course, I wasn't in those debates. I watched them. I don't recall that the coalition issue came up very much as a discussion point in those leaders' debates, but the reality of it is we are in a Westminster parliamentary system where coalition governments are completely legitimate. We just had one in the last British government.
One of us is going to kill someone here.
We've seen cooperation in Canada far more frequently than we've seen coalition, and that's why I drew attention to the government less than 10 years ago. Although it was 50 years ago, a lot of Canadians are very passionate.
Oh, when the debates are so good.
He's a hell of an orator. That's the same game.
No.
Large steps forward for the good of the whole country. Steps like our national healthcare system and Canada pension plan and unemployment insurance, as well as the flag were productive.
Second one, I got a king on the run.
Did you win the first one?
Yeah.
Was a minority. So I think Canadians felt that the minority.
I'm just trying to figure out if there's a way I can do this
And the other concern I have,
quickly. I should have thinking ahead, but every time.
if we're allowing
Knows all that.
our system of government to increasingly become an elected dictatorship,
Hang on,
the Prime
Ratchet.
Minister walking into the Prime Minister's office and finding all the levers of power they need to control not just their own MPs and not just turn cabinet ministers into ciphers for policies developed through PMO, but also reach out, suppress the civil service, and gag scientists, and even hurl insults at the Supreme Court of Canada. So we need to reduce the power of the
hilarious.
Prime Minister's office.
Yeah, it's just check because you can go there, yeah. If I looked at that and maybe moved before. It's not. Oh wait. Move somewhere there.
Well, I'm gonna have to say Justin Trudeau.
Move there. Checkmate.
Criticizing the NDP's do nothing approach versus the Conservatives do everything approach. Secondly, he talked about parliamentary oversight and national security.
I have the Queen down here.
Oh, that's Queen, right?
Yeah.
He doesn't deal with laws that are already on the books. There needs to be oversight. Of course,
You're there?
comment was, I don't approve of that kind of oversight.
No, yeah, because of this. Can't go anywhere there. Yeah.
Oh, look at that.
I did it.
God damn, nice. Handshake.
Just through the pieces.
We're talking about, divisive narratives. We don't want to isolate and alienate
Two rounds.
communities and
Two rounds.
a lot of critics of C-15